started. So at 6:02, we'll call our meeting to order. Dr. Thomas, if you would conduct roll call for us. We can't hear you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Davis. Can you hear me?
Here.
Okay. Mr. Stevens,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Dykeman,
Here.
Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Mr. Worthy,
Here.
Dr. Knox,
Here.
Dr. Gant,
Here.
Dr. Maddox.
Here.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. We do have a quorum present. We'll move forward with item number 2 on our agenda, which is to amend or adopt the agenda. The floor is open for motions.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Yeager.
Second.
Okay, a second by Mr. Worthy. Any questions or discussion? Okay, Dr. Thomas, if you would take roll for all in favor of adopting the current agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis, Mr. Davis,
Here.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Yeager,
Yes.
Dr. Dykeman,
Yes.
Mr. Worthy,
Yes.
Dr. Gant,
Yes.
Dr. Knox,
Yes.
Dr. Maddox.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So that motion carried with us adopting the agenda that's before us. Item number 3 on our agenda is our norm discussion. And that is what will be taking place tonight and tomorrow. I do want to thank Dr. King and Dr. Rain for agreeing to help facilitate this discussion. The goal of tonight's meeting as well as tomorrow's meeting is that we'll have some products that are remaining norms that we want to complete. So far, individuals have, like if you were working on a norm, I placed those in the folder just so we would have it as a context. So I've placed those in a folder and you should have access to those. I know some people sent ones that we had all been working on for our reference. Drs. King and Rain may also have some additional norms for our reference. And based on what we will be working on, well, what we will be working on is based on the feedback, basically that survey that I sent out about just ranking the norms. And so they will be facilitating that discussion, again, with the goal of us having completed some norms for this evening and tomorrow evening. So thank you for joining us, Drs. King and Raymond. I see Mr. Pruitt is here as well. And Ms. Palmer will be taking notes for us. So thank you for agreeing to that, Ms. Palmer. I'm going to turn the floor over to Drs. King and Dr. Rain to facilitate the discussion.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone, Chairman Gant, members of the board, Superintendent Thomas, and any others that are attending and observing. Council Pruitt, we're happy to be here to facilitate a continued conversation about your norms. Just to give you just a quick review based on what you just heard Dr. Gant mention, we'll walk through a facilitated conversation around the following items. We'll begin by just doing just a quick reminder of what the purpose of norms will represent, and move on from there to categories of norms that you have identified for the purpose of your work. And they will consist of, but not necessarily limited to, your communications, which is a broad category that can serve multiple purposes, as well as board meetings, etc. We'll begin, however, with some discussion or just a quick high-level review of the purpose, just a reminder of the purpose of norms. With that, Julie will be sharing a screen, and I see that we have it already. So Julie.
All right, it's great to be with you guys again. Just a kind of a refresher on what norms are, because they're different than policies. So when we work on norms, when we talk about norms, we're really talking about how we behave. And it gives more detail to your policies, especially around your code of conduct. Let's see. I cannot get this screen to share. Hold on. It won't go forward. Hold on a second. It worked earlier. Don't know why. Share again.
Julie, we could see what you had on the screen, so that
Yeah, it
was-
wouldn't go
yeah.
forward though. That's the problem.
yeah, but sometimes there's a lag in it.
Yeah.
I had that experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you an overview of expectations about everyone in the governance team, including the superintendent. And it really just, it's nice because it makes your job easier. And these are some of the reasons why we need norms. And the main thing is it sets up a positive working relationship with everyone on your board and in your community. It outlines strategies for collaboration, clarifies your roles, and it also informs the public on what is expected board behavior and what your responsibilities are. And it also provides standards for your future governance team members. I know you've got 3 new board members coming on in January. So it'll help them understand how to behave and what to do and what's expected of them. I know it really helped me when they developed norms right before I got on my board, and they allowed me to be a part of that process. So I didn't feel as nervous taking that seat. So it just kind of, it's like the golden rule, and it takes the guesswork out of how to behave. And ultimately it increases your productivity and your accountability, and helps you not get sidetracked away from what your real mission is, and that's improving student achievement. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. Sam, I don't know if you want to add to that. I'll share the next screen.
While you're doing that, I'll just echo what you mentioned, just reminding the team that norms really serve the purpose of pinpointing your operating routines. And typically you determine you select categories of norms based on your previous experiences as a team sometimes. And so sometimes it's a reaction to some experiences that you've had as a governance team. Other times the governance teams decide that they want to be proactive to document how they agree to function as a governance team within certain categories, so that it is specified and clarified for you, but also for any stakeholders who are inquisitive or interested in how you function within certain categories. The last thing I mentioned, and we'll circle back to this, will be that there are multiple categories for norms, and you all know that I'm preaching to the choir with that, but you can select those that you think are of foremost importance for you as we move through. And I think that's what you've been doing. So I'll stop there, Julie.
Right. Let's see. So, you know, oftentimes when you're running into people in the public and they want you to step outside of your lane to help them with whatever their issue is, and you have to refer them to the chain of command, a lot of times it's nice to refer them to your board norms so that they get an education and understanding what you can and can't do and what you guys have agreed upon. So in working with Dr. Thomas and Dr. Gant about where we were with the status of your norms development, I just kind of wanted to get my head around it. So it looks like you've already adopted as a board, the full board, three of them: how to address situations in which non-board officers do not follow policy, the same situation with board officers who do not follow policy, and school visits. And they also shared with us your norms that are in development. So the stakeholder concerns, communications, Norm 13C, how to conduct a disciplinary hearing for a violation of the board code of conduct, ethics by a board member of the board, and then meetings in general. And given the discussion we had with your team yesterday and the priority that you voted on what you wanted to focus on as priorities, your number one was stakeholder concerns, and communications was two, and board meetings was way up there as well. And usually with communications, you break it out by each kind of demographic and category. So, you know, communications between you and the superintendent, among board members, how do you handle stakeholder concerns? LSGTs was way up there for y'all, as well as board emails. I added social media was further down, but it's an important one. Media is also an important one, and with staff. And then conducting town halls could also be part of communications if you decide that, or if you want it separately. That was also one that was a priority. And the last two were strategic planning and self-eval. So what we thought we would do would be to start with board meetings, because that's communications is a big undertaking. So we thought we'd get our feet wet with board meetings and take it from there. But we just wanted to get your feedback if y'all are okay with moving forward in this order. Any thoughts on that?
I'll accept the order that's been presented, but honestly, I thought strategic planning and self-eval would pretty much kind of create the climate in which we operate, so that the others would fall in underneath that larger picture. But that's my one vote.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Well, I mean, I do think that in terms of town hall meetings, that is, you know, that is under stakeholder concerns, the way I look at it.
Our goal is to get through all of these in the next 2 days, just so you know. That's a pretty high goal, but I think we can do it if we buckle down and focus on it.
I like the idea of starting with board meetings only because it seems a little bit more concrete than maybe some of the other ones. And maybe, like you said, it could be one that could get us going and feel like we were making some progress right away. I could be wrong, but that is my sense.
We also felt like, you know, board meetings are so important to what you do, and the community sees you right away in board meetings, and you have probably another board meeting next week, who knows? So we thought it was a high priority as well, and y'all did too, but that was one of the reasons why.
I agree. Let's board meetings.
Okay, well, let's start with board meetings then, if we're all in agreement. You want me to share what y'all have, what's in the document that's been drafted, or would you like me, did you share the sample protocols norms that we sent a little while ago with the board? I can share my screen, but I didn't know which one you wanted to start with.
I mean, the ones that we have worked on, or the ones that you've sent as samples?
Which one would you like to start with? The samples or the ones that you've already worked on?
Oh, I don't have a preference. I would defer to others. They have a strong preference.
I'm looking at the document that was in board docs. That's the sample document, and it's item M, I believe. Board meetings in the sample document that was sent, and I'm not looking at the document. I'm looking at the GSBA document. I'm not looking at the one that was already submitted, nor do I know if I've seen that, so.
Okay, I'll put the link here.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a Google Doc or Google folder that has a bunch of them in there. Mr. Worthy, I think, worked on the board meeting one.
Okay,
I did.
I probably saw it a long time ago then, all right.
Are you going to share that, Dr. Gant, or do you want me to? Okay.
I'm putting it in here now.
And you are sharing that where?
I just put it in the chat,
Okay,
and the document or the folder is shared with you.
thank you.
I can share the screen as well.
I was going to say I have it on my screen.
So in essence, in board docs, we have sample norms like that you all sent from GSBA. And then in this folder, we have just the work we had done so far. So if you all recall, we sort of stopped after we had adopted 3 at the recommendation of GSBA, Dr. Frame and Dr. King, who said, this may not be as an efficient use. We were, because it's a lot of work that goes into it. So, and maybe we need to work all together versus working in these smaller teams. So this is just the work that had been done up until that point, but never made it to full board discussion or adoption.
So I would suggest then that the board take a look at what's here. And I think it's a good idea, Dr. Gant, to your point, for them to take a look at it and think about whether it reflects what you want it to reflect as a governance team, being your full board and your superintendent both, because I think it sounds as if some board members might or might not have been brought up to speed with what's here. So you want to begin to talk through that?
Sure. Well, I'm sorry. You're talking about the board, or you want me to give an overview of?
Yeah, I think you could begin with the conversation around what's there, because I know you have members of your team that worked on this. And I think the charge for the governance team would be to listen to what's here and the message that it sends, and to determine whether it reflects what you all agree. And if it does, you can move forward, in the spirit of agreement. But if not, you can pinpoint the places that you think you need to tweak it, because the norms are yours. And our role is to facilitate that conversation and decision-making around that to help you settle on some agreement moving forward. So, yes.
I did notice that the essence of both of what are in here about meetings are captured on one of the sample that we sent you earlier today that's in board docs. They're very, very similar. One's just more in bullet form. And this is a little bit more, paragraph, which is fine.
The first paragraph strikes me as policy. All 3 of those statements are in our policy. So obviously there's some overlap with policy and norms. But having worked through the policies recently, those all 3 of those are part of our policies.
Well, I will, do we want to talk about it line by kind of paragraph by paragraph, Lakeisha, or do we?
I think it just depends on how the board wants to continue. If you've already read through these, and then you can sort of compare these to what's been sent, what's been uploaded in board docs. And so I'm deferring to the board. The ones that are here, some people may be a little bit more familiar than others because, let me exit out. Because if you recall, like there were certain ones that we were working on. So for instance, with Dr. Knox, myself and Mr. Stevens and Dr. Thomas, I think we worked on We worked on the one regarding the hearing as well as communication. And really those just, went through literally the specific steps that we needed to take in as many areas as possible. And then I think Dr. Dykeman's team had you all worked on stakeholder concerns, which may actually fit under, may or may not, depending on what the board thinks, may fit under communications, or maybe its own separate one. And then Mr. Worthy, as a part of his team or individually, I know different teams did it differently, worked on board meetings. So I don't know if we need to go line by line. We may need to, if we're going to, if we want to have the product be an actual norm. But I would say just using both of those documents as our reference. I know it's hard to have all of that pulled up, but if we can have, using what's in board docs and then what we've already done, because as we decide on one, it may be that a team or a person has done a good bit of work around it and is more about organizing it. But
You can also use the sample one that's more bulleted to check off what's in here, because there's a lot of redundancies in it. He covered a lot of the same things that we recommend as best practices. If you want to,
Where is the bulletin one? I'm sorry. I thought it was in Google Doc. I mean, I clicked on something, but I need to be admitted. Where is the bulleted one?
On board docs. If you go to
Greg,
that agenda.
share it if you like.
Okay.
Greg, I just posted the bullets in chat, if
Okay.
that's easier to look at.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Gann, I just shared, is that the document you wanted, the one with the policies that Ms. Tillman pulled for us?
yeah, and that's just for our reference. So
I just forwarded it to everyone.
So at this point, we have a policy reference. I know Mr. Pruitt is here and Dr. Yeager is here. We have what's in board docs, which are sample norms. And then we also have the work that has been done so far. And so from considering that, what we need to, ideally, we would be working towards a document that is either influenced or shaped by those.
Does it make sense for somebody to be making edits while having this discussion?
Yes, we had asked Lisa.
Oh, okay.
So she could make edits to this document that we sent. Typically when we do this, we show the sample norms and then have a discussion about each line item with the board to see what's relevant to their board and what's not, and what they'd like to add, because there might be something that's missing. And whether it's whole subject matters or just one line item. So.
So if we're going to work line by line, obviously the first line is clear. The second line is clear, except I'm a little concerned about the 2 hours. We had a really good meeting the other night, a work session the other night. I guess, does that not count as a meeting? Maybe the meetings are 2 hours, but the work sessions go longer. It wasn't the board's fault that it went so long. We had a lot of reporting from the district staff to get through. So the meeting went very long, not because of dysfunction, just because of lots of information. Go
That's
ahead.
an excellent point, Patricia, because I put those 2 hours in there, but obviously with the work session, and you're going through item by items. And in my mind, I'm thinking that this was the regular meeting, the second Thursday. And of course, when you have a work session, obviously it's going to be longer. But I don't, excuse me, I do not see a regular board meeting being as long as a work session, because you have gone through those things. Why fly through the same ground twice? But even with the board meeting, if it has to be 3 hours, because when I sent this to you and to Warner. If you recall, I said I welcome comments. We in this together.
I think that 2 hours is a nice target, but when, for example, we had 3 hours of public comment, that's obviously not going to happen. But what I've thought in my time on the board is that I really wish that we would make our decisions, the big decision should come in the first 2 hours. I have a little saying on the boards that I'm on, which is you never make a good decision after the 2 hour mark because people just start to lose it. And so that might also suggest that we look at the structure of our meetings in terms of when we do what we do.
You're correct.
Let me just say that I can follow the bulleted points a lot clearer than I can this script. And so I found myself looking at the bulleted points and then seeing it just makes more sense to me. I'm sorry.
Not sure how to do bullets. And the text. I don't know how to do bullets, Greg. Maybe Lisa does.
You just want to use the bulleted one on the right
Oh,
as
there she goes. She's in it.
a template.
Lisa's on it. Thank goodness for Lisa.
There you go.
Yeah, could we,
Tricia, I was talking about the one from GSBA is what those bullets, but
she's also making the one that is scripted, Greg. She's also making those bullet points.
okay.
So there is be recognized by the board chair before speaking and following Robert's Rules of Order. I've never seen a board put limits on how long they meet. So that's not included there, but if you feel like that's important, I don't know that you might want to back yourselves into a corner. That could be a goal for sure. Especially if you've just discussed everything in a work session, but you never know when there's a hot topic and you're going to have 100 people show up for public comment. And that does.
Yeah, Julie, I was going to offer the thought of suggesting some clarifying language. Like I think that looks like with the changes that's been made now, it's pinpointing language that states that that's a goal or something like that, and then that means that you can deviate from it. It could be less quicker than 2 hours, or in circumstances where you are required to stay longer, of course you will. So you don't have to tie yourselves down to the 2 hours, but you can use some language that says that that's a goal for you if that's your choice.
Well, I mean, the problem with that, Dr. King, is that, I mean, when I first got on the board, I was asking a lot of questions, and I had one board member in particular. He kept pulling me off to the side and saying that it was lengthening the meeting, and I didn't feel like that was right, because I felt like that my questions, I was not trying to drag out the meeting. I wasn't trying to debate. I was simply trying to get clarification. So, because when I got on the board, I mean, the meetings would last very short periods of time. So I don't know. I think if you put it out there as a goal, then, you know, it may be misconstrued.
Understood.
Oh, and I understand what you're saying, Greg. Now, in this strip, the first one that I worked on was norm 3. Also, I worked on norm 3, I mean 11, but I can't recall exactly where I put this. That if you have, I know I wrote a statement in there stating that if you have a burning question, a lengthy question for the superintendent or whomever, then submit that question to those people before the board meeting. And then, of course, that would sort of limit in terms of discussion on that. Also, I put in one of these, it was in norm 3 or norm norm 11, that board members are limited in speaking for 3 minutes. And I can tell you exactly where I got that from. I got that from a commissioner, and that commissioner is deceased now. And I'm talking about Jared Neesmith. Because I think I talked with the president of Oconee County Board of Education. That's Tom Odom. He and I used to work together. And I think he said the same thing to me. So there are ways that you can get things done in an orderly fashion and do it expeditiously.
So I'm sorry, is our only question a 2-hour limit? Because again, if the work of the board exceeds 2 hours, then I'm certainly mindful of the fact that as Dr. Knox has suggested, you want to get the majority of the decision-making done earlier. But if our agenda, as it's written, allows public comment for 2 hours, then that's not going to happen. So is there something that we really need to spend this much time on, given how much more we have to do? Would we take care of this if we work through the other parts of our behavior in the meetings in terms of introducing subjects that are already researched, and that would allow us to move more expediently through them? And if they are not researched, being able to make a decision to put those subjects aside until we can do that proper vetting of that request or requirement. And then in terms of keeping it to 2 hours, if we have the work to do for the board this month, that's the work of the board this month. We should be able to, I would think, limit it by limiting the agenda and limiting discussion to a number of minutes instead of allowing us to speak without any constraints.
I was also going to ask, would it be appropriate in the norms, even though it can't be mandated, but that board members are encouraged to, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, but encouraged to read the material, prepare for the meetings in advance. And, so a lot of times I think the time is spent because of lack of knowledge about what is being covered, and things have to be asked and clarified that have been already presented or shared. So some of the time can be limited just simply by preparation. And as Mr. Worthy shared, taking advantage of the open door kind of policy that I have, and thereby giving you access to all of our directors and chiefs to provide clarifying information rather than having to engage in long clarifying conversations in the meeting.
I totally agree with you. And that is a best practice, that you get the board packet in enough time that if you do have questions, you get on the phone with the superintendent, meet with her in person, whatever y'all prefer, so you can get clarification and you can get your questions answered. Or if you want the staff to address it at the meeting for the benefit of the other board members, that's fine too. But you shouldn't have to spend so much time asking that many questions if you are prepared. And now Greg is a different story because he was new. So he was trying to understand all the nuances of being a new board member, which is understandable. So if you have a procedure in place or a protocol that it's expected that you check in with the superintendent before the meeting, see she can call everybody to see if there are any questions, or you call her, however you want to work it, that works best for you guys.
But isn't that a part of our domain, coming to the board meeting prepared?
It is. And so what I was going to say about the whole 2-hour thing, I personally wouldn't want to back myself into a corner, but I think that that's a goal for you guys. And so when you do your next self-evaluation, have a serious conversation of where you guys are with your board meetings and how efficient they're running and what improvements you can make going forward. That's what I personally think. I don't know about you, Sam, but
I agree. And on the example language over on the right side, I think bullet number 6 kind of goes after that at a high level. Maybe not as detailed as you all might choose to do, but it speaks to being on time and fully prepared to discuss and act on action items.
And that's where I would like for us to make the distinction, because again, when I remember reading our domains, then that was one of the things that I recall, and I don't remember which domain it is, but should that be repeated in our norms? I would think not necessary, but.
Well, I think that it's really important. Some of your policies have a lot of specific details in them about behavior, which a lot of boards don't have that language. Even if you do have a policy on it, it is nice to have it in one place, especially for the community and for new board members to go. It's like one-stop shopping instead of going through your 300 plus policies to find that nomenclature and that description. So we just don't want to contradict what's already in policy or procedures, you know? So that's our recommendation, is to put it all in one place, but make sure they don't contradict each other.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Dr. King said about a minute ago. It's very important, and I put that in one of the norms. I think it's in norm 3. It's very important that you start every meeting at the assigned time. If you have obviously you can't start a meeting unless you have a quorum, but if you have the quorum, 6 members or whatever, wrap together and get it started, because if you start on time, it sure enough is going to move your meeting along and get things done. You see, what I'm seeing now and experiencing, much of what we discuss in work sessions, we go back through the same kinds of things, questions, etc., in the board meeting. That shouldn't be. That's going to prolong things, you know.
My take is that we're actually doing better with our board meetings. I think with work sessions, I think the presentations have taken a long time. But by saying that it would be a goal or an aspiration for us to do our decision making in the first 2 hours, well, we're not really making big decisions at the work session, so that kind of leaves the work session off the hook. We're not making formal votes there, at least. So I think that the work sessions may require more time, and that doesn't seem bad to me at all. I do think that having regular meetings that go on for 4 or 5 hours is just not productive.
I agree with you, John.
Understood.
Well, I think that one thing that we have later on in this proposed norm is the fact that we get the agenda for the work session a week ahead of time. I think, even though it sounds good, there are things that are happening up to a couple of days before the meeting, and I think of last week's meeting where we had a document on the topic, but when we came to discuss it, we had a PowerPoint presentation that really gave a lot more meat to the discussion, and we didn't get that in advance. I think it would have been nice. I think it's too much to ask for with the staff to say, well, come up with this really kind of like immediate situation PowerPoint, a PowerPoint on an immediate situation. Do it a week ahead of time so we have a chance to look at it. But I think certainly looking at it, even if we had gotten it, one day before, or at the most with the morning of the meeting. So I don't want to tie in the staff having to have everything fleshed out a week ahead of time. But I do think that everything that I think for us to see a PowerPoint for the first time at a work session is not a good practice either.
I agree. And Dr. Gann and I have talked about getting back to that timeline of having, and she just put that in there under President's report. I did talk about how we will get back to the timeline of getting information to board members 2 weeks in advance. Now, you're right, for things like some of the PowerPoints and information that we're getting up until the last moment with some of the decisions we're having to make, it might be more of a week out, but wanting to be sure that at the latest, if there's a board member meeting, so we would get you all print material 2 weeks out, but maybe like a PowerPoint might be that Monday at the latest before that Thursday meeting, just depending on the topic, if it's something that is time sensitive that we don't have access to. But Dr. Gannon and I did discuss that in our agenda preparation meeting last week before last, and that's a change that I've already shared with our cabinet.
I just don't want to tie the superintendent's hands. I mean, a day ahead of time, I'm happy with that. I mean, if I'd rather have information that is up to date, like on the opening of school and that type of thing. I'd rather have it that day early in the morning than something that is already kind of moved beyond a week ahead of time. So anyway, that's
Excuse me.
I think if we can have it a week ahead of time, a week before that work session, to the extent as possible. If there are individual questions, or if we are speaking with the superintendent about questions that we have, that's an opportunity as well to ask, have there been any updates? And if there are like sweeping updates, then I think it would be appropriate for the board to expect the superintendent to share those significant updates with us. But having something to start with a week before the work session, I think it gives us, the time we need to even know what questions, to ask.
now one idea that we've talked about, even Dr. Means talked about having schools present what is happening in individual schools, periodically, have like maybe one school present at a work session or something. Now I don't know if that's what other boards do, but that was to address the fact that a lot of us don't really feel like, we don't even know who the principal is of our schools. And so it was talked about as that, and that's something that you can't really prepare ahead of time. I mean, you want the principal and whoever he brings or she brings with him to help facilitate a discussion about what their school is doing. So I don't know if that would be an exception to that, Lakeisha, or not.
We have done that before, Greg. We did that several years ago. I thought it was very helpful with principals, but I think the way we did it was not just every school, 21 schools, especially if something is going on hot and heavy in their school. And I don't mean bad now, I'm talking about good things and something that they wanted to share, need to share. Then of course they would come and present to the Board of Education. But you mentioned something that is very important a few minutes ago about all of our principals. But now the video that Beth Moore sent out with the, the newsletter, I believe, that was very nice, because most of the principals I know, but there were some that I didn't know, but it was really good to put a face with a name. But it would be even better if you put a face with a name. Well, we aren't meeting face to face now, and I'm afraid to do that. I guess I'm paranoid. But anyway, even with Zoom, it would be better to do that, because you need to know who your principals are. I can recall when I was out campaigning my first term on the board and the second term on the board, I got questions like that. And I know that was one lady, I think she thought that she was going to back me in a corner in terms of asking about the principal of this school, the principal of that school, but I was ready for that. That's important for board members to know.
So are those principals' names and photos on the individual school websites or school pages on the website? I know the
names are on there, yes. And some of them even have photos.
Right, yeah.
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I have always gone to find out, but I agree, the video was an excellent video, and I really enjoyed, I actually watched it a couple of times, because I'm like, okay, I thought that was who that was, but it was really reaffirming, and it was uplifting to have that presentation. So yes, I agree that that's totally not dealing with this board meeting, but yeah, good, would love to know those things.
I feel like a lot of what we're talking about, the distinctions are between work sessions and board meetings. So I wonder if we want to make that distinction, if we want to have a norm for meetings and a norm for work sessions, or if we want to specify within this norm what applies to a work session and what applies to a board meeting, because I don't think that we can say the same things or have the same norms for a work session and meeting.
That's an excellent point, Dr. Dackman. I can tell you the reason why, because when I went on this board back in 2005, for several years, we actually had 2 board meetings. And then the superintendent at that time was Dr. Phil Lanew, brought the idea to the board in terms of having a work session rather than having, we were calling it an agenda setting session, but actually it turned out to be 2 board meetings. So what you said a few minutes ago, making that distinction between a work session and a board meeting, I think that's good.
I think that, what norms are to be focused on is your behavior. So
Yeah.
I think that if you're in a board meeting versus a work session, it shouldn't matter. Because we're talking about things like, being prepared, being respectful, having active listening skills. It's really about your behavior. And, whether you have each school come out and present once a month, that's great and all. That's not really a norm. I don't know that you're talking about that in reference to the timing of your board meetings and how long they go. But I don't know that we need to get hung up on that at this point.
Okay.
Just my opinion. So,
What you mentioned, Julie, I have that in a norm too. I think it's norm 3 about, and I stated about be mindful that the Board of Education is judged by the behavior of its members, by its decisions, and also by its fairness, because people pay attention to that. And that is extremely important.
exactly. Yes, I printed out yours. So I'm trying to find that one. There was norm 2 that you did as well, right, Mr. Worthy?
No, I did 3 and 11. So it's in norm 3.
Okay. This one wasn't labeled. Board members should dress appropriately for board meetings, casual dress for work sessions, professionally dressed for the regular board meetings. Is that the one?
No.
Oh, there it is. Park County Board of Education shall conduct its business in accordance with Georgia law. All meetings of the board shall adhere to requirements of Open Meetings Act. Meeting procedures, all meetings of the Board of Ed shouldn't last more than 2 hours. Use Robert's Rules of Order. Be mindful that the Board of Education is judged by the behavior of its members, by its decisions, and by its fairness.
Yes, okay.
That's what we were talking about. I got to it.
Yes.
Right. I've noticed that Mr. Worthy has inserted his preference for professional clothing and professional dress at meetings.
I think that
He upgraded it from the bulleted suggestions. If Jared Bybee were with us, we might have a bit of a debate on that.
Well, I'm going to say it now because I'm not. I like the way that's phrased in GSBA where it says business casual.
Well, I'm sort of chuckling about what Dr. Knox said. I sort of expected Dr. Knox or someone to say that. Well, one of the things, we are elected officials, and when you look at it realistically, folks, much of what we do, it can trickle down to the students. And that's several reasons why I put that in there in terms of the work session, a casual dress, but with the regular board meetings, professionally dressed. I do believe that it makes a difference, especially, you know, the message that you're sending to the public. And as I said, things that can trickle down to the students. I put emphasis on that when I was a principal too. Of course, I did it. I didn't do it maliciously now, but I did say to the faculty, look, when people come in this school, the parent, superintendent, whomever, I want them to be able to make a distinction between the teacher and the students. You don't come to school dressed like the students now. That's just not appropriate. And I'm thinking the same thing with board members, because we are in the public eye. Now, not only at board members, every time you go out, you believe me, you are in the public eye all the time.
Anyway, I would like to take out the professional dress and put in business casual, because I know what that means. It just means everything but the tie. I don't like ties.
I think it's hard to know what professional dress actually means, because based on your profession or just how you dress for your profession, I think is really different. I feel like if I dressed in like a suit for a board, first I'd have to buy one for a board meeting, and second, I would look like I was dressing up or like, you know, putting on a costume. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I think I would prefer business casual.
Do you think it should be business casual for both the work sessions and the regular board meetings?
I mean, that's fine with me. I guess I didn't generally make a distinction between the board meetings and the work sessions in terms of dress.
Now, another reason why I put that in there, because I've been on this board since 2005. At that time, we didn't, well, I guess it was a norm, but we didn't call it a norm. We as a board, we agreed that we would come to our work sessions casually dressed and then professionally dressed at the regular board meeting. Well, when you look at the word professionally, of course, I went through the same thing when I was a principal and talking to the faculty, because they got into, you talking about a three-piece suit? Except, no, I'm not talking about that. You know, you professionally, if you have a shirt on and a tie, it may not have a jacket on, etc. But you know, if you all feel comfortable with business business dress, that's fine. You know, but I think you send a strong message to the public. Dress would send a strong message to the public, and also, as I said, can trickle down to the students. You may think that they don't pay attention to that, but they do. I can give you some examples, but you may not want to hear all that tonight from me.
My thought is this, both Mr. Worthy and I tend on the conservative side, and I've dressed up, not quite as much as Mr. Worthy, but probably more than the other men on the board. But both of us are rotating off this board, so I think the people that are going to be on the board in the future should probably weigh in on what they think is appropriate here.
Good thought.
And
Well,
so I'll be here for 2 more years, and I think that professional dress, again, to 2 things. One, it takes you out of that casual mindset and puts you in the space of recognizing that you're about the business of the county, not necessarily doing a thing for pleasure. And so to me, that's just the way I've understood, again, professionalism in terms of dress and in terms of meetings, because we're meeting as a board, and that is an elected body. And I don't know, I think I see casual dress among most elected officials when they're out campaigning. But once they take their seats, they tend to be a little bit more on the formal side for dress, because you never know who's going to show up at your meetings. And so the goal, I think, is to always present the dress in the manner in which you're going to conduct business. If you're going to be about the business of the district, then I think the professional dress is the one that leads you in that direction. I think in the work session, we're more relaxed because we're in a learning mode more so than a decision-making mode. And so I'm very comfortable in the work sessions with the casual dress. But I think I've noticed even on the mayor and commission that there is a distinction between their work sessions and their business meetings for most commissioners.
So I think I agree with you, Linda. The issue, I think,
Yeah.
is if we say professional dress,
So can we call it?
we're gonna have 8 out of 9 are gonna be women on this board next
Right.
January. And what does it mean, professional dress for women? And what kind of wardrobe do we all need to invest in? Which I hope we don't have to, but I can
I don't
spend
think we
my.
have to. I think we're looking at our kids. We're teaching our kids to dress for success. I think whatever standard we would judge them by in terms of dress for success would be the same standard that we would approve. We have those same words, I think, in our kids in terms of preparing them for an interview. So we encourage them to not wear your school clothes to an interview. So there's a protocol that's pretty much understood. I think you're right. It'll be different for women, but I don't think it's going to be any different than the same rules that we have for our kids. I don't expect anybody to wear shorts and halter tops to work sessions. And so I certainly wouldn't expect to see that as a business casual attire, nor would I see that as a professional attire. So for women, it's always been challenging, but I think the rules are still the same. It's the modesty and again, the decorum. And again, I'm the last person to stand on protocol for what other people set as standards. But again, the idea is to dress modestly and not to have your appearance be a distraction to the work that's happening.
Speaking as the one male next term, I mean, to me, a coat and a long sleeve shirt and dress pants, to me, that is business casual. And I don't see it as not a tank top or you know, something like that. So
Yeah,
from a guy's perspective, I don't know, I'm not going to speak for females.
Well, for women,
You better not.
business casual,
Yeah.
you know, versus professional. I don't want to have to wear a suit and high heels and hose, you know, but I can look very professional in a business suit with pants, you know. So
Mhm.
business casual is the more common nomenclature because people can identify with it because most businesses are business casual these days. Those restrictions have been relaxed over the years, but not to be disrespectful or distracting or anything like that. When you say business casual, you know not to wear inappropriate things. Casual, that's a different story. Just from my experience, it worked well for us. That's what we were, business casual, and the guys would wear their jackets, no ties. Sometimes they wouldn't even wear a jacket because it was hot out, you know, but they always looked nice and presentable.
Okay.
You're muted, Greg. I know you were saying something, but we couldn't hear you. You're still muted.
For a work session, you know, I would wear jeans and a tucked in shirt, you know, so that to me was casual.
Yeah, that's casual.
So
I wonder if we're spending too much time talking about something that maybe isn't even an issue. I know it's important to have something down so that it doesn't become an issue later, but I have not ever paid attention to what any of you were wearing. And maybe that's just me, but I didn't notice a distinction between work session and board meeting. I didn't notice what you were wearing at either session. And I just feel like dictating what people need to wear is, I'm not really that comfortable with that. And I understand we need to be presentable, but I just don't feel like anybody has not been presentable or appropriate at this point.
At your work sessions, let me ask you, what is your staff wearing? Because the staff is there giving the presentations and all.
They always dress nice because they're attending these meetings, especially when we're face to face. They've worked all day and they don't show up at work not looking presentable.
it's
I
business.
don't recall. Go ahead, Greg.
It's business casual.
Or
I mean, they're not
Staff is
wearing-
not. Staff is not business casual. Staff are always in business attire.
That's what I figured. And I just wonder what message does it send to them if y'all are at work sessions wearing jeans, you know?
Yeah.
Is that even a concern? It might not be, but it's just a thought because to me, the work that you do at a work session is very similar to the work that you do at a board meeting, a regular board meeting.
Okay, let's say business casual all the way around. I'm good.
And retreats are a different story, you know, because that's usually a day thing. It might be off campus, be casual at those. It's an important thing for a lot of boards because some people were abusing it. And I know for our district, we had a man coming in with holy jeans on, you know, so that's why that came up and it became business casual. It was kind of a compromise because you could still be comfortable. Because our meetings were very long for many years too. And you want to be able to focus on the work and not be uncomfortable.
It sounds like business casual gets you closer to agreement from the whole, not quite there exactly, precisely, but
I think we
maybe
can
do
live
that.
with that. That's a consensus thing. Let's go with business casual and move on.
Yeah.
Then casual for retreats, not business casual, but just casual.
Business casual.
Business casual.
Yeah, I think, yeah, business casual. I go along with that.
Okay.
Now that we have Mideast peace, let's move on.
It looks like Lisa has used this time to put all of the bullet points from the sample into the document. So it looks like everything's in the same place now. So I guess we can just go through
Yes.
them all.
Go through and see how you feel about them. And if there's anything that pops up that you're not in agreement with, you know, bring it up.
Stop right there about be mindful of the Board of Education is judged. And let me share this, and maybe I shared this with the board before. I got that directly from Zenda Bowie. That's who I learned that from. She passed out a sheet in a training session, and I kept that sheet. That's not coming directly from Charles Worthy now. Zenda Bowie.
Yeah, that sounds like her. Conduct board meetings that provide a strong force for the public and other stakeholders informing their view and perception about the effectiveness of the governance. Does that say the same thing? Or do you want to have that specific language that Zenda gave you?
Which one was that, Julie?
On the right-hand side, 1, 2, 3, 4 down. Conduct board meetings that provide a strong force for the public and other stakeholders informing their view and perception about the effectiveness of the governance team.
Okay. I can tell you where I got that from an NBA conference. Okay. I went back and pulled things, okay, to put it all together.
Well, it's very true because they're judging you on your by your behaviors. So, and the board meeting is the one thing that they get to judge you on all at once, which is so much fun.
So should we
And
cut that one and move it up, Lisa? Move it up above the italics?
I just don't see how that's a norm. I know that's an expectation. I just don't see it as a norm. The way it's written.
Didn't we say that the norms are expectations?
Yeah.
It's like, because we usually start, the governance team agrees to blank. So conduct board meetings that provide a strong force, you know, that sort of thing. It's what your actions are going to be, what your. So if we use Charles, it would be the governance team agrees to be mindful that the Board of Education is judged by its the behavior of its members, its decisions, and its fairness, and will act accordingly, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know what format we'll ultimately end up using, but the other norms that we've adopted have a format that starts with a rationale. And I wondered if that could be put in the rationale for why this norm is important instead of being a bullet point.
That's a good point.
Say that again.
In the other norms that we've adopted, before we kind of lay out the behavior, we give a rationale for why that norm is important. And so I wondered if this part, that the be mindful part, that the board is judged by the behavior of its members and so on, whether that could be part of the rationale for why this norm and these behaviors are important.
Yeah, that's definitely a rationale for sure as to why. I mean, our goal was to get through the norms so that you have the norms, and then you could take them and go back and put it into the form that you have, the format that you already have for your previous ones that have been adopted, because you list certain policies that are related to it, certain domains, which they're listed here too, and then your rationale as to why this norm is needed, which is very thorough and very, very good to be able to do.
That's good.
So it sounds as if we've almost gotten through this one, right? All right.
So we left the should occur in the first 2 hours. Is that supposed to still be in this bullet?
That's up to y'all. What do y'all think? Is there consensus around that?
I
Not
don't
with
know
me.
how you enforce it.
I mean, if we're talking, if we're applying to all our meetings, then I can't go along with it. If we're talking about, the public formal meetings, that we have every second Thursday, then I'm fine with it.
That was my intent, Greg. Yeah, you're right on it. The regular meeting, and maybe that should have been stated that way. Yes, not the work session now. During regular board meetings, yes.
Does that prohibit us from having an executive session? Is that going to move executive sessions to after the business of the board is conducted? How does that affect the agenda?
Well, that's sort of separate there, because if it's before or after, normally when you have a executive session before a board meeting, is something burning that you got to get done. But if it's after, I don't think it'll make any difference, because normally when you come out of executive sessions, there's no one out there in the boardroom.
And that's a function of how we set the agenda.
Correct. You're right on it, Linda. And John mentioned something similar to that a few minutes ago, how you structure things, structure your meetings.
So the governance team agrees to, and then it goes, all meetings of the board shall adhere to requirements of the Open Georgia Open Meeting Act. So the governance team agrees to have all board meetings adhere to requirements, just so it fits into the nomenclature. And then the next one, the regular board meetings, it should be governance team agrees to have all regular board meetings structured to allow for having all decisions made during the first 2 hours. Would you rather say a majority of the decisions instead of all? I just don't want you to paint yourselves into a corner.
And I don't want to be in this corner with a 2-hour time, but I seem to be the only one speaking up about that right now. So, I mean, are we comfortable with the 2-hour time limit? Do we need this to govern this, or what happens if we don't do it? And so why would we create something? I don't understand.
I'm not comfortable with it, Linda.
Yeah, I'm not either, because I think we still have to reconcile what happens with those public comments. If we're looking at the business meeting and that's what this is about. I mean, depending on the topic, we've had public comments last more than an hour.
And you are exactly correct on that. When you say the 2 hours, I think we all can have a mindset this particular way. The 2 hours not really just etched in stone, because we do realize periodically you're going to have something to come up, as was mentioned a few minutes ago. If you have 60 letters to read, you know this is probably going to take you beyond the 2 hours. But on an ordinary meeting, when you've had a good discussion and iron out things in the work session, I think the 2 hours would be fine. But now it's not written for, there's no way that you can write it to fit the situation for every meeting, because we know things are going to come up beyond 2 hours at various times.
So may I ask why we have spent almost an hour on a 2-hour meeting concept if it's not that important to us? I think if we're moving toward having efficient meetings, that should be our judgment, is that we are adhering to our policies and that we're having efficient meetings. But do we really need to spend this much time on 2 hours as a limit for something that we can't possibly enforce? If our work is to do the work of the district and it takes more than 2 hours, then it takes more than 2 hours. And so the question is, do you do it in this 2-hour meeting, or do you come back for another 2-hour meeting? If we don't have it finished in 2 hours, do we have to adjourn the meeting and reconvene and call a special meeting? So again, the 2 hours is an issue for me, because it doesn't speak to the actual work that we're trying to do. And literally, we have spent an awful lot of time talking about that.
And I would also add that you've got, if you want to have the most important decisions made during the first 2 hours, if you do have a hot topic that's going to be voted on that night and you've got a lot of public comment, you want to make sure that you have the public comment before you vote so that the community feels heard. So you wouldn't want to put that at the end of the meeting. I agree with Linda. I just don't know that this is really that important. And I don't want to see y'all back yourselves in a corner and, not be successful with it.
But think this way, if you spend 4 hours, 5 hours, and we have done this in a work session, and then come to the regular session the next Thursday and spend the same amount of time, that is senseless. I don't see that, because you're discussing the same thing. As I said a few minutes ago, obviously with the 2 hours, there are going to be some meetings that are going to be an exception to that.
Well, I think that if you work on other things around the meetings in terms of your protocols, like mining your airtime, being prepared, asking your questions during the work session or ahead of time, these things are going to fall into place. Because yeah, I agree, 5-hour meetings are never productive.
No, your brain dead. Yeah. But now, in fact, I don't know about other board members, but I know stakeholders have sent me emails. They have called me. They have, before the pandemic, stopped me in various places and talked about these long meetings. You know, and some say they just, you know, even when we're meeting face to face, they would leave. And even when we're meeting Zoom here, they just say they turn it off and go on because it's just too long. Not talking about the work session now, talking about the regular board meetings after we have gone through everything and sift through everything in the work session, and we come back and do basically the same thing in the regular meeting.
So it sounds to me like if we perhaps limited debate or discussion on something, if it goes beyond 15 minutes or something like that, then we would simply table that until we can get all of those questions collected and answered and bring it back. So, I mean, there are ways to control that out of control discussion that we have. That part is our behavior. I think, again, to say that we're going to finish every meeting within 2 hours is a little bit premature, because again, if we ever get to a place where we're talking about the children and the programs that are affecting the children, I don't want to limit discussion on that, especially if we're having presentations from the district. And I get that we should have that in the work session, but if that generates questions that have to be answered in a regular board meeting, then it may cause it to go long. I'm simply saying, I don't know that we should spend this much time when we've got all of these other norms to get through on putting a 2-hour limit to a meeting when we don't know that that's going to be beneficial. I think that's a behavior that we can adopt as we go
So
through
can
the
I
rest of the.
can I suggest that what we've written now is pretty loosey-goosey and as written as an aim rather than a requirement?
Yep.
And can we move on?
That would be great
Yeah.
if y'all are in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
I totally like that. And again, I want to get to why norms if we have policy. And so the norms are supposed to be the things that actually govern our behavior. Is that right? And so it can't be loosey-goosey to the point that it is not meaningful to us. So again, if we're saying these are our norms, I have every expectation that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to these norms.
One of the things that we did, because our meetings went really long and there were only 5 of us. And at the end of the meeting, you had board comments and the board chair would call on each one. And, you know, sometimes I didn't have anything to add because it's already been said, so why repeat it? But everybody felt like they had to contribute something. So ultimately, we got rid of those at the end of the meeting. And if we had any comments that we wanted to say in public, we'd give it to the board chair and the board chair would just read it. And it saved so much time. And there
Yes.
are 9 of y'all. So it's things like that that you can think about to really make your meetings more efficient.
Thank you.
We don't even have those.
Well,
already.
good, you know.
No, but I was wondering if, I mean, along the lines of what Linda was saying, if maybe we want to add a little bit more structure to or specificity to the part about being mindful about airtime, so that maybe that is something that we can control better, and that may then lead to it being not as long of a meeting.
And are y'all recognized by the board chair before you speak at your meetings now?
So I think we're supposed to
Most of the
be, I
time.
think what makes it hard is that we sit in a line. And so I don't know, I can't speak for Dr. Gant, but I would think that it's kind of hard to see who is, and because there are 9 of us and we're all in this line, I'm not sure what the best way is to make it so that we can be recognized and it can go better.
Well, there are electronic systems with microphones that when you want to talk, you hit a button, and the primitive one, the board chair can see it and writes down the order they go in, or there's more sophisticated ones where it's all right here electronically, and she'll know who said they want to speak and when. So there
Well,
are on that with technology.
Dr. Dyckman was exactly correct there, because I've been there and I've experienced that. But with purchasing of the building on Prince Avenue and building, hopefully renovating that place, the sanctuary there to become the board room. If you notice, other board rooms are sort of like in a curve. built that. And with the person that is presiding in the middle there, you can see the hands when they go up. But like what Julie said a few minutes ago, that would work too. But it's difficult to see people when they raise their hand the way we are now.
Yeah, that is difficult if you're in a straight line.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge for the chair, and maybe the vice chair could help, you know, and she probably already does, try to figure out who wants to speak next, because there's sometimes a lot to manage during a meeting. So being mindful of airtime as not to monopolize the discussion, is that an agreeable norm for y'all?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely agreeable with it. I just wondered if we wanted to add any specificity to that, of what that actually means.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm open to discussion about it.
What would that look like? Your specificity, what would it look like, Dr. Dykeman?
I don't know. I know people have brought up before, like 3 minutes or something like that. I don't have anything specific in mind, but that was what I was thinking. And that is totally up for everybody's input.
I know one time I talked for 8 minutes and that was totally out of line. I apologize.
Talk no more than 3 minutes and talk no more than,
Isn't there something about Robert's rules? You can't talk more than twice until everybody's had a chance to talk, or something along those lines?
Yes.
yeah. But you want to give everybody a chance to speak first before you speak again.
Okay, that's good. I can support that.
Is everybody in agreement with that?
I am.
Talk no more than 3 minutes at one time and talk no more than twice before everyone has had a chance to speak.
Okay.
Great. All right.
I'm so glad it said put so in there. It was worrying me.
So
I'm like, isn't that okay? I'm good now.
So you're saying that you can talk twice before everyone has had a chance to speak.
Yes.
Just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with that, or majority of you are.
We still have to be called on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it would be helpful too if, if I can get assistance and I think this is maybe something Dr. Maddox and I can talk more about.
Timekeeper.
Either timekeeper, or at the very least, helping me recognize who spoke twice, because during an actual board meeting, like particularly the ones that are in person, as like you're like focusing on like at least 6 different things. And sometimes I know that will, I may miss some of that. And so Dr. Maddox and I can talk more about that, but then also with board members, it would be really helpful if you could help monitor this as well.
Yeah, and if Mike says something, we'll all shut up. So maybe Mike can help us out with that too.
Well, some boards
Well,
have a timer,
Yeah.
so up on the screen, there's a timer for public comment, because you allow 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So they know how much time they have. Maybe it would be efficient for y'all to do that so that you see the timer.
I was just going to say that, we high tech, and of course the time is on the screen there. And then of course, when it expires, you get a buzzer. When you get that buzzer, you know that your time is up.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, a new thing because of COVID is everybody's doing virtual meetings now, right? So
Yes.
you want to have a couple of norms around your Zoom meetings in terms of what you want to require, you know, good lighting. You want to make sure that your camera is on unless you have to step away. But you want to make sure that everybody is engaged electronically as well as in person. So I don't know if you want to apply some of these to that, or if you just want to have a blanket statement in there about electronic meetings as well. Because who knows how long this is going to go on.
Some of that you can reflect on your, I guess, your most recent experiences since you've been on Zoom quite some time. And Dr. Gann, as chairman, I think you made a reference to some difficulty being able to see who's raising a hand and that kind of thing. So I guess you can reflect on whether you think you've had some difficulty with board members that wanted to speak being recognized. Have you had that recently on virtual meetings or not?
That happens all the time because you can't see who's trying to be recognized.
Raise your hand, I guess, on the Zoom.
Yeah, we've done that too.
Usually what has happened is that someone has said, oh, somebody else, Dr. Yeager has her hand up or something like that. So it's kind of been the buddy system.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. We help monitor because the person speaking frequently might not see the hands that are up, so. Or we'll monitor if someone puts something in the chat as well.
I just want to make sure that, you know, you don't, in your regular meetings, what is it? You don't have sidebar conversations, passing notes, texting. You want to have active listening skills, and that also relates to Zoom and electronic meetings.
It does, yeah.
Because it's hard to engage with someone if you can't see them, or the lighting's really bad, or they've cut their head off, you know. So just using kind of best practices for Zoom protocols. So do we want to run through all these? Scroll up and run through and have y'all read them again to make sure you're all comfortable once she finishes with this?
So we talked at one point about these agendas, having time, didn't when we did our board meeting training, was it the Roberts Rules or something that was recommended that we set time goals for each agenda item? Dr. Gant, didn't we talk about that?
Yes, we talked about, Ms. Bowie brought that up as a way to sort of guide us, not as a part of the published agenda, but something that we see to guide our, the amount of time we spend on each item.
That's a great idea. So at least y'all know during the meeting if you're ahead or behind. I guess the first word should be just agenda, not plural.
I do want to mention from a practical standpoint, and I guess this is like, we'll have to work it out and maybe test it out, but you know, if we are trying to figure out, if we have a timer for individuals that are speaking at 3 minutes, and then we have the timer for the general sections of the meeting, I think that can get a bit challenging for the person, be it me or whoever, Dr. Maddox, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Maddox or Ms. Palmer, but, you know, to monitor those different timers. I don't necessarily know how to fix that, but I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe if you have, you know, usually you have a copy of the agenda. I don't know if you've got a hard copy or not. And if you put the time, like we start the meeting at 7:30, by 7:45, we should be done with this item. You know, if you put the times down to guide yourself, if you don't have enough time clocks in the room because of everything else, you can just look down at your watch and see how that's going, or you could use the support of Dr. Maddox with that. But I know that I was a timekeeper when I was the vice chair for many years. So it's really hard to do it all yourself. You're right.
Dr. Maddox, do you have any thoughts about, and we can talk later, like offline if you would like, and I don't know, maybe give it a stab at November's meeting just to see how it works, or but do you have any thoughts around it?
So is this an item that we would assign to the vice president always, and then just, you know, adjust it as we need to?
We can work on it offline for November.
Yeah, give it a try and see how it works. Can't hurt, right? Okay, so you want to start at the top and scroll down so everybody can look at it again one last time and read through it to make sure that we haven't left anything out or we haven't put something in that you don't want. And Lisa, you're doing a great job taking notes.
Absolutely.
That's actually Dr. Yeager taking notes. I'm just going behind her formatting it.
Oh.
I appreciate her doing that because she is much faster than I would be.
Very impressive, Dr. Yeager.
He does it in policy and it's wonderful.
We all have our gifts. Some of us are missing other gifts. I'll just cherish my few that I have. Okay, yeah. I've just been typing what people say.
Yeah, the only thing I'm still concerned about, which I won't make a big deal out of it, but you know, is just getting everything a week ahead of time. I mean, I just think it. I mean, I think it's a good goal if we have no urgency to it, but.
I think, Mr. Davis, we can get the majority of items to you all a week ahead of time. So I think it's fine because this is a norm, not a law. And I know that sounds, but you know, so there will be things like you said earlier, that's right. You know, something may come up, let's just say tonight from DPH about reopening that we really want to share with you all Thursday, and it wouldn't fall within that. But I think the goal would be that that's our general practice, and recognizing that unexpected events occur and there will be exceptions, but our general practice and expectation will be to ensure that you get things at least a week in advance. So that's the goal and should be the norm, but realizing that there'll be sometimes exceptions.
Yeah, I think what would be, and that, this might be my last word on it. I think if we said, Monday morning, Monday of the week of the meeting, I think is ample time. I just don't, but anyway, that's your department. So if you feel good about that.
I wonder if it even needs to be said in here because this norm is supposed to be about board behavior. And so I
I was
think
gonna ask that, Dr. Dykeman.
if we just say that the part that starts with, read the packet to prepare for meetings, submit questions in advance. I don't know that we need to comment on the administrative norms.
I agree with you on that. I will say that to get a PowerPoint an entire week before the board meeting is pretty generous, and it isn't always the standard. Sometimes the PowerPoints aren't even uploaded until the night of the board meeting because they want to walk you through it and they don't give it to you ahead of time. I don't know, Sam, what your practice has been, but
Yeah, it's going to depend on what the work of the board at that particular time. So it could vary, and I think what you're working to do is to be respectful of the administration and their need to have time to prepare. So as long as you know the topic and the expectation on the agenda by rule of thumb, you also use good judgment as a governance team, realizing that sometimes the administration might need to make tweaks or changes to some things. And so good judgment is always going to be good with that.
yeah,
we just had a recent example of last week, so I feel like if we had that a couple of days ahead of time, I wouldn't have expected a week ahead of time, but it would have been nice to have it even the day before because it was, it was literally on our strategic plan, and we had an outline of the strategic plan, but then the way that it was unpacked in the presentation was much more comprehensive. And so it just kind of, I just kind of took my breath away. And we're going to talk about it again this week. But if the idea was for the work session to kind of add meat to the bone, then I don't think we were prepared for that. But that's just one example, and we're just coming straight off of a fresh one.
gotcha. Thank you for that perspective. All right, any other thoughts or comments? Anything missing with this norm?
I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on it, but did we have a transparency norm in here somewhere? I think the no surprises, is that what covers the transparency piece?
Yeah, no surprises, sadly, some board members like to play gotcha with the staff.
Mhm.
And so that's where that came from.
Yeah.
No surprises for staff or fellow board members. And that's when you talk to the superintendent ahead of time if you have questions, or I'm concerned about this, and I'm not going to vote for this because of this. So just letting you know ahead of time.
Okay, great.
So that's kind of that transparency thing, yes. If there's stronger language you want to put in there, go for it.
My thoughts were that, it should be the governing thing for our actions.
That's nice.
Thank you.
I'm happy with it. Mr. Worthy. It's a little bit longer than the original, but I'm happy with it.
Yeah. I am too.
It does look good. So are we all happy with it? And we want to take a 5-minute break before we go on to the next?
That would be great.
Is 5 minutes enough for you guys?
Not for me.
All right, so be back here at 7:46.
Okay.
What's the next one we're going to do? Communications, you said?
We'll start picking that one by each subject. All right, see you in a couple.
So it looks as if we have just about everybody back. And I see some sharing on the screen that could help open some consideration for which one of the items within the raw category of communications you want to consider beginning. Because you've done some work on this already. So I think it's similar to the previous one. It would be to take a look at what's there. And I think you had in your notes, Julie, a certain category that was of priority in communications based on the conversation.
Yes, stakeholder concerns was the first one in terms of their order of priority.
Can I ask, how are people reading this? Because it's so small for me.
Are you on full screen?
Let me
You
see.
can pinch, Greg, you can pinch it and spread it out.
If you go
That's
to
what
full
I do.
screen on the right-hand side where it says view,
Right?
and then, like you said, you can grab it and pull and make it even bigger at the bottom right corner.
Are you on your iPad, Mr. Davis?
I guess that's what they call it. I have the non-Apple. I have I have a notebook of some sort.
Ah.
I don't use Apple products.
You could do that same screen pinch on Windows.
So it's
If
not,
you have a touch screen, yeah.
I do,
So just,
but it's not doing like it's supposed to, like it used.
Does it help if I shrink that one and make this one bigger?
There you go.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, it's still not. It's still something wrong with me at this end.
Can you open it in the Google Doc and just have it open on your device?
Maybe, yeah. Now that I do have Google Docs open, so maybe that's what I need to do. What norm is it? What norm is this?
6.
6.
Communication.
started a draft for stakeholder concerns. Trying to find.
So it was under communications, norm 6, I think. And then
Yes, it is.
item C for constituents. I think that's what I was assuming.
There is a separate norm for stakeholder concerns, but I think that,
Oh,
I think it can be folded into this one. It was norm 5, I think.
oh, okay. Hang on.
I think that one should be under that folder as well.
Yeah, I found it. It should be on your screen now. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, you don't, if it's going within the other one, you don't need all that stuff at the top, just the part that you're on right now, starting with the process, I guess. And then the, I should have, oh, you guys can't see where I'm pointing. The part where it says other questions, those were questions that I had for us to discuss. So that should have been highlighted too, I guess.
And Dr. Dykeman, this is the one that's aligned to policy that we reviewed, correct?
Yeah, this one, I mean, this one basically comes from the back of the business cards, which comes from the policy. The only parts that the highlighted parts were the things that aren't really specified. You know, so there's notifying the superintendent, but how do you want to be notified? Do we also need to notify other board members? And then is there a time period? Do you really want every single email that we get? Those were some of the questions that I had.
Right, so A, B, and C come directly from policy that Dr. Yeager and I reviewed today. I actually had a similar question to what you have on number 4 in my notes from earlier today about the sharing of responses. I mean, if it's verbal, I don't think I need to be necessarily notified unless it's something that, you know, maybe it's going to escalate to me and you just want to give me a heads up. But, you know, every time you all have a conversation with someone at a grocery store or at the mall about something and you suggest they contact the principal, I don't think that has to be relayed to the superintendent, whomever that might be, via email. You know, if someone says to you that there's a group planning a protest and you learn that at Target, then of course, that would be something that would be beneficial for the superintendent to know. I don't know when you're asking about individual emails. I don't know. I mean, Julie and Sam, how is that normally handled? They always make me aware if it's something that I need to respond to, then our board members do a great job of replying to the individual and copying me. But if it's something where they direct the person back to the school, which actually usually never happens, it's generally someone that wants to talk to someone at the district level, but I don't know.
Yeah, many times governance teams on this one in terms of if board members are notified via email about a concern, then the first consideration for the board member would be to determine if, based on their judgment, to determine if it's something that needs to be brought to the attention of the superintendent. But I think that's a key piece because the door should be left open for the board member to use his or her good judgment about whether it needs to come to the superintendent or not. And so that not all emails that board members receive will need to come to the superintendent. So you got to leave some room in there for you all to make that decision about when it goes. And that's the same thing with, and that's an example of email, but that's the same thing with if you have a conversation, and I'm gonna use the example you all just gave, a conversation in a grocery store when somebody comes to a board member, you know, some things you're gonna be able to refer and respond to the person to say, okay, well, you know, the team has a process for that, and I'll make the superintendent aware. Other things is you're going to consider this just general conversation, and you might decide that that's not something that needs to go to the superintendent. So you're still going to have to use your judgment about which one will need to go, so that you all don't get bogged down into thinking that every piece of communication has to be referred to the superintendent. And that's the intent of this one, to try to make sure that happens. But if you haven't had those challenges, then boards don't develop norms or specify norms on it if they think that they're already following their steps they need to. So you all need to think about that.
So this is semantics, but we just changed, I just saw the change from communication to matters. Is that what just happened in A, B, and C?
That was the word I heard. People
What's
use
on the back of our cards? This came off of our cards. Does it say matters or communication?
I believe it says matters, but hang on.
Okay, I'm good.
Oh,
If
no, you're right. It says communication.
Well, I was, I don't want us to have to reprint cards, and if it means the same thing.
I think in the policies that we just reviewed, it says matters, but I don't care.
I'd like to see them be consistent at some point. So I'm not sure which way we'd go, but I don't want to spend any money or time on that. So the other question though is, and not a question, I think I heard you say, Sam, that the goal here is to kind of filter some of the communication that is floating out there, not include everybody on everything or include the superintendent on everything. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, I was saying the goal is to leave room for you to make good judgment about what comes to you as a board member so that you determine whether it needs to go to the superintendent or not, or her designee. So you don't need to bog yourself down. We suggest that you don't bog yourself down with saying that all items that are emailed or all correspondence or communication that's verbal, that all of that has to go to the superintendent. You need to have some language here that gives you an opportunity to
filter some of that.
Right.
Mhm. Okay.
And Dr. Thomas, you probably want to weigh in on that one too, because the norm process is about the efficient flow for
Right.
things. While you just gave, I think, some good examples of exchanges that you would want to get, and some that may not be necessary to come to you. So,
Right.
So that's important.
And I agree with what you said, Dr. King. I mean, I think it's just about discretion, and I know that's hard to quantify, but if it's just a simple, redirecting, they ask, who do I need to talk to? I haven't been receiving, my child isn't getting homework, or I'm not getting feedback from my child's teacher, just something, I don't want to say minor because that's major to families, but something of that nature, just simply saying, have you tried to contact the teacher? If that hadn't been helpful, contact the principal. I don't need to necessarily know those things. If they say that I reached out to the principal 5 times and they haven't responded back to me, then it would be appropriate for me to become involved so I can determine what the issue is and make sure that their concerns are addressed.
And sorry, and what about other board members? The same thing, sort of use discretion on whether this is something that needs to be shared with other board members, or?
A lot of the things that you get as a board member are from individual parents with their kids' issue. But if you're hearing trends in the community, the same complaints about, whatever it is, whatever the issue is, or a personnel issue, then you definitely want to share it with the superintendent, and then use your judgment if it's something that needs to be talked with amongst all the board members, or copied on an email, or spoken at as an agenda item at the next meeting. Because the sooner you get out ahead of something that you see trends on, better it's going to be.
Yeah, and remember, part of this too, to Julie's point, is that if the board member deems it sufficient or at a level that needs to go to the superintendent, and they refer it to the superintendent, once the superintendent does her review, then her response is going to be that she sees the copies of the remainder of the board too. So that was part of some of your discussion as well. Once the superintendent goes through the process of reviewing and responds and gives you an update, or gives the board member an update, then she also loops the remainder of the board in so that that helps too, because then it doesn't require each board member to try to reach out to all of the other board members to do it as well. Because once the superintendent has it, either her designee or she will then respond accordingly and copy all the other board members within a timely manner. So something to think about too.
So that's a clarifier for me. So if I'm going to send something to the superintendent, I don't need to respond. I'm waiting for the superintendent to respond to that, and then the superintendent will copy me and anybody else that she thinks needs to hear that response. Is that right? Did I understand that right?
Yeah, I don't want to put words in Dr. Thomas's mouth. Dr. Thomas is not trying to do that, but I'm just throwing out some examples of what the result sometimes becomes with this. So weigh in on it. I was
Yeah,
giving you some
so,
examples.
I mean, like I received some emails, actually several every day this week on about school reopening that's going to a board member and the board member sends it to me. So when I reply, I generally reply all. So then it goes to the board member, it goes to the parent that sent it, and then frequently it may have had my school, my lead nurse or my chief academic officer on there. And then it goes to everyone. And part of my reason for doing that is because one, I want the board member to know I've responded. And two, when it goes to multiple people, frequently everyone assumes someone is going to answer it. So at least if I reply all, then whoever else is on our team that received it knows that, okay, Dr. Thomas has replied to that. So.
Dr. Thomas, I'm trying to, because yeah, I guess I wasn't clear on that either. Because remember, I texted you a concern last week about the computers.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
and that was fine. You sent it to me as a text. I reached out to the appropriate person. I think that was the one that it's actually been about 2 or 3 weeks ago. You and Dr. Yeager both, I think, had heard from the same parent with concerns about a filter. So
Right.
I just reached out to, you sent it as a text, Dr. Yeager sent it as an email. I sent it to the appropriate staff person. They responded to me, and then I shared that back with her because she had sent me the email. So,
and the reason I sent it as a text is that I thought it might blow up that day. And I wanted you to know about it as soon as possible.
right. Either way is fine.
But I don't, if I've got that, it seems like I would just ask you the question and not, I think sometimes we just copy the board too many times, where, I mean, you can respond to the board. You could say in response to another board member, this is what I found out. Okay, you have a similar question, but we've really gotten to the habit of copying each other every time. I'm talking about other board members, and I don't know if that's really necessary. And I guess I'd like to hear what our GSPA people say.
And we have this in, I'm sorry to cut both of you off. We have this in another one of our, I guess it was a norm. Dr. Gant, you can correct me, but when we talked about request from board members to the superintendent, we have similar language that the information from that request will be shared with the entire board based on the belief that it's information that the group as a whole will want to know. So, it's that same kind of thing to me. So if it's something that has global, implications, district-wide implications, then I would send that out to everyone just so that, that way all of you don't have to email me because you'll probably hear that same question. So that's how I've made that decision, and it's on one of our other norms.
And I think we did that. So as an example, there was an issue with one of the schools in my district, and I was getting all the calls and emails about it. And I didn't forward all of those to all the other board members, but I did bring it up with Dr. Thomas. And then when it got to the point where she was doing something about it, then she sent out an email to the entire board sort of explaining the situation. So I feel like that is kind of how, or at least in that experience, that's how it did work without everybody having to get every single
right.
That makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And that aligns with
Figure.
Go ahead, Chair. Dr. Gant.
I was going to say, to Greg's point, I think we've been in that place because historically, we had, we have had like an email sent and then like different people had different opinions about who it should have been shared with. And so I think that there may have been, you know, like how you sort of swing the whole other way, at least for me, just started, you know, trying to share as much as I can with the board. But I do wonder too, like with it says under 4 where it says if appropriate, when we're talking about norms, we're talking about, in my mind, ones that we've struggled with. And I think that this has been sort of a significant issue for the board when we were trying to figure out, okay, well, what goes, you know, to Dr. Thomas or whoever the superintendent is, or what should go to the whole board. And I think those of us that have received emails before and we didn't forward them on, we assumed it wasn't appropriate. And so, you know, but turns out we all had different ideas of what appropriate, what appropriate is. And so I do hear the piece that we don't want to be sending everything, but I also, you know, don't want us to get back to that place where we have different ideas of what's appropriate and it leads to some, you know, like a larger problem. In fact, I think it led to a lot of discussion.
I'm kind of with you on that, Dr. Gant. In terms of, I appreciate being copied on the emails, especially if they're sent to the superintendent. I'm not going to respond to that person. And if I got that same email, I'm not going to then turn around and forward it to the superintendent again. And the only way I can know that is to know that it's already been sent. So yes, for a while there, I had a ton of emails that I just didn't do anything with because again, I had received that same message. The challenge comes up when we don't receive, all of us don't receive the email. And so that conversation happens between Dr. Thomas and that board member and the other people that were copied on that email, and the rest of the board is pretty much in the dark about that, again, unless there was a special effort made to include the entire board. And so that puts you in the position, or I would think that puts Dr. Thomas in the position, especially of having to monitor, you know, every email that she sends to make sure that I've added the entire board on that stuff. And so again, I thought the pendulum swinging to that direction of more transparency was better than putting it back into our discretion, because that then creates an opportunity for, again, the transparency not to be there.
Linda, we had that issue with some community members sending certain opinions and ideas and complaints to 3 of our board members, but not all 5. And so we had to develop a norm because, you know, they were trying to split the board. And if we saw that the whole board wasn't copied, we would respond, copy all the board members and the superintendent in our response and let the stakeholder know that we're looping the entire board into this discussion, because you don't want to have factions set up based on what certain stakeholders want. You can get into some trouble that way. So we needed to develop a norm for that.
I really appreciate what you just said, Julie, because you're talking about communication. And the minute you do that, it's going to mushroom, and all of a sudden, you're going to have a breakdown in communication, and someone going to be left out, and it's going to cause a tremendous problem there.
Yeah, sadly, you're right about that.
And I guess what I'm saying is that as long as appropriate is in there, I think it still gives us that space to do that. You know, but I guess I think what I hear you all saying is that, you know, our meaning of appropriate should be like if we get an email from that's sent just to 3 or 4 people, just to automatically copy it to everyone.
Right.
I don't know that
I
this
think as appropriate is what's causing the problem for me. And again, I would tend to err on the side of caution, and that would be that make sure that everybody gets the information.
I'm not looking at appropriate. I'm looking at 9 board members plus the superintendent. And you communicate that way, you don't have a breakdown in communication and won't have a problem later on.
I agree.
But you know, one thing we do that I think has been helpful for me is when when we've had a lot of issues that have been addressed to the entire board about school opening and school closing and virtual learning and all that kind of thing. The board president has been the responder, you know, thank you for your email and that type of thing. I don't, you know, I think that I don't see how it's helpful if some people of the board respond and then other people don't, and then it seems like, well, you know, these people really cared about what I was saying, but these other people didn't. I guess I would, but on the other hand, I don't want 8 people to have to feel like they have to respond back to me saying, thank you for your email, thank you for your concern. So I have been relieved knowing that I know that well, Lakeisha is going to respond to everybody who's written the entire board on the topic.
Right, and that's why it's so imperative when you have a norm like that, if all the board members are copied from a stakeholder, the board chair will respond on behalf of the board, loop in the superintendent if need be, if she wasn't copied before. But that's why it's on you guys to make sure that people are aware of your norms and protocols, because that's the norm. And they shouldn't expect to hear from the other 8 people. If that makes any sense.
I
So,
think it makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
I think that's how we were operating for a while, and then we seem to have slipped away from that because I've seen several emails where multiple board members responded. And again, so that's the part that confuses me. And I was like, okay, did I miss something? Are we not doing this anymore? Or what's happening here? So yeah, if we could put it in the norm,
Yeah.
that I think we said before, the president would respond on behalf of the board. And then if it's to the superintendent, then the superintendent would respond. And the emails that I've seen that made that clear to me were when the statement was included that because of our norms, you will hear from this person, the president, or you will hear from the superintendent. And that should be the end all for me.
And
I
I
think
think,
if somebody you know personally, yeah, most of my stuff is a telephone call, and so I handle it that way. And if it's something that I have to refer, then yeah, that's when I put it in an email.
and
We
perhaps
recently addressed this in a policy, and Dr. Yeager may remember which one, but it's important to remember that as we discussed in connection with that policy, the board can only act by a majority vote in a public meeting. So when the president of the board responds, she has to be careful to not take some position or make some statement that the board has not approved.
Right.
generally what it is the president will respond, you know, thank you for your concern, and that's about it. But I think one thing that would be helpful is that if maybe predicating that would be something like, on behalf of the board, we appreciate you expressing your concern, and Dr. Thomas is considered, she's on this email, and so I am confident that appropriate action will be taken or whatever. So anyway, I just feel like that might help explain to people why not every single one of us, it's not a popularity contest where so-and-so has 3 board members respond and somebody else has nobody respond.
Right. If you have the right semantics that she starts the email response to, that certainly helps, because, you know, I know all of you want to help people, and that's why you're on this board, right? And you want to contribute, and you want to make sure that these stakeholders have been heard. So it's for some of us, and it was for me, it's hard not to respond to all emails because that was my purview. But when we created our norms, it just made us more united, and it saved us a lot of time and headache, and probably the stakeholder too. So.
Is it possible to, like, I'm just thinking, you know, it's sort of few different reactions, you know, right? A person can get an email that says, thank you for your email. And, you know, this is, you know, Dr. Thomas's area. And then they can become very upset because they're like, that wasn't my, that wasn't my question. I want to hear what you think about it. So there's that, but I also, like, I know that I understand that I'm not speaking to the things that we have not taken action on, but I wonder if it would be possible to say maybe the board chair or designee, because sometimes there's information that I just do not, like, so we had a recent email, I think, about budgeting, and I couldn't, for the life of me, I couldn't go back and figure out, like, okay, I know it's some other information, but I did just say, I tried to stick with the facts, but the follow-up emails were very helpful. And it was more so information. It wasn't like, this is the position of the board. It was just simply information that I think was useful for that stakeholder's question. And so I'm or we've had questions about policy, and I've had to, like, loop, it's been something simple about policy, and I've had to, or Dr. Yeager has responded, and I may not be able to recall, or can't recall at times, like, what was the order in which we did this, but more factual information rather than, well, the board believes this or that. So I'm wondering if it would be, is it appropriate, first of all, is it best practice to have that statement where it's the chair or designee, or are you saying that it's just best practice to simply have a more of just a standard approach, or a standard response, and leave it at that?
I think the chair or designee, I mean, most of the questions are probably in the purview of the superintendent to answer. The board voted this way because it felt blah, 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 based on what the meeting you just had about it was. Or you haven't even talked about it yet. And thank you for bringing it to our attention. We'll discuss going forward. There's so many different things that stakeholders can contact you on.
Right.
Without knowing specific details about this instance versus that, I understand the concern about using your own judgment, whether you loop everybody in or not. But
Okay,
if
here,
you're all copied, then you're already on it. So that's the question that you're asking, right, Dr. Gant?
For the statement that Dr. Gant made a few minutes ago about budget, and I think I'm familiar with that. You correct me if I'm wrong, John, but John intervened and did an excellent job in terms of explaining the components of the budget, because I was getting ready to respond and say the budget had been passed, because this stakeholder was going deep into the budget in terms of, by school not being in session, that the money was not being used. And simply, that's not true. But at the same time, like I said, the budget had been passed. But John did an excellent job in giving explicit information about the budget.
Well, what I remember is that Dr. Gant responded by saying that we had done the budget and we were past that part. And so I just followed up by saying, just to cover, I could almost hear the other person saying, but why can't we talk about this? So to try to tamp that down, what my response was that our budget is about 85% personnel anyway, and schools are not out, not closed the way the message suggested it. And so it's like, well, no, we're not closed, because I don't want that to be said and not be responded to. And most of our expenses are people, and people are working. So it just felt like something that needed to be said, and I thought might cut down on the number of exchanges that we might get after that.
and I do see that as an appropriate response by board members. I don't see that as necessarily in the lap of the superintendent. I understand that the budget is introduced by the superintendent, and nothing can be passed as not introduced by the superintendent. But at the same time, we were elected, and that's one of our purviews. One of our three purviews is to do the budget. And so it just seemed appropriate that we would respond and not simply say, okay, Dr. Thomas, that's in your, your lap.
I like what Tisha's put in under number 6, again, when the board chair or designee, I think that's a great response, because that's also one that, because they were asking the board specifically to respond to returning or reducing taxes because we were not in school. And so that also is that's administrative on one part, but then we approved the budget. And so I would think the finance chair could have also responded to that, or it could have been kicked to the superintendent to respond to, period. So this is one that I think is a great one for us to finish this discussion on, because it kind of flushes out some of our spots of indecision, I would say.
You're correct, Linda, and I was right on the threshold of responding to that. But when, and I'm a person that believe in this, when I read what John had said, I said, well, that's enough. So rather than responding to the constituent, I responded to John.
Yeah, and that was a great response, by the way. I'm not criticizing the response at all, but
No, I know
what
you're not.
I'm saying is, like, where was the first response supposed to be? Because we'll see this kind of thing again. And it's a coin toss. It could have gone to anybody.
Right. So your language that I think I hear you all suggested on board chair or designee, I think would be appropriate here, because then it allows you to make decisions based on what the message is or what the inquiry is, in terms of that. So I think
That person got 4 email responses from us within less than an hour for that question, which was non-contradictory, non-conflicting, but all different information and useful information.
It sounds like that worked well. And, sometimes the board chair is tied up and she doesn't get to the email till hours later, and you want to get a response back, which I totally understand. But John waited until after Dr. Gant responded. So it sounds like that one was a good response.
Absolutely.
He added to what she'd already said.
Right. And so the only thought for the board or board members would be to try to work to ensure that what you are, if you are responding and you're going to do multiple responses, that you feel really good, like the example you're giving, that the information is factual and it doesn't get into decision making or action.
And I think it would still be good to make it a handoff from the board chair or the superintendent. And so it's, make the warm transfer over to say you'll hear from our finance committee, or you'll hear from our policy committee, or however, so that all of us will know who's going to respond.
Good point.
I have a question that's not in this one. The very contentious email that we got that caused so many problems had to do with the superintendent.
Which one?
Well, this was the one that everyone complains about that Ms. Amison sent to a few of us that had to do with the previous
That's a good one.
previous superintendent. So that was not, I didn't think, an email that was warranted to forward to the superintendent at the time. It didn't seem important to me, and I didn't think it was actionable. So I did not forward it to anyone. I just filed it away. But that obviously caused some hard feelings by some, by many, in fact. So we have a norm when the concern or complaint pertains to the board. We don't have one about what if the complaint pertains to the superintendent.
I'm wondering if this policy wouldn't have worked fine if that email had been forwarded to the superintendent and the remaining board members. Then that would have been open. That would have been transparent.
But who was going to respond to it?
Why would anybody?
Well, I mean,
Who was it addressed to? It would have been the president of the board.
No, it was addressed to, it wasn't even addressed to, it was just an opinion about what this person thought about the superintendent, which is why I did nothing with it.
wasn't the question.
So wouldn't the president of the board be the person to respond to that?
I know I did.
And this is my concern. That email came from a person of great influence in this community. This person is the president of our Career Academy Advisory Board. This person is the president of the Foundation for Excellence. Did the board members who received this recognize the, I guess, is it power or influence that this particular person had? And did the board members that received that then act on that influence? So
No,
that's a stakeholder concern that I have when we allow the community to actually, again, divide the board. It is a good way of saying that. But the other thing is, I'm still appalled. I am absolutely appalled that that happened because I don't really know what to do with that.
So not everybody was copied on that?
No.
No,
Well-
not everyone was copied. And I think I replied maybe something like, thank you for your email. I think.
yes, you did. You did.
Yeah.
You did.
But I think there's the assumption there that, when we receive these emails, I don't know everyone in Athens. I don't think many of us recognize, like who's sending what. But I think this goes back to the wording of this, right? Because apparently there was an expectation that all emails, and actually there was even conversation that was shared that all emails should be sent, everyone should be copied on it and should be sent to the superintendent. And I didn't know that. I perhaps that was standard operating procedure, but I had not seen that. And so I just thought, oh, okay, well, thank you for your email. And I didn't discern that it was something that needed to be sent or that action would be taken on. And so I think that goes back to the wording of this and what that expectation is.
But
Yeah,
the main problem with that email, that same person had done that before, did it when I was the president, and I immediately sent it to the superintendent and copied it to the remainder of the board. Now, keep in mind now, we have a policy on that, policy BCB. If you read it, anytime you receive an email with a complaint or making a request, that is to be shared with the superintendent immediately. But like I said, that's the second time that person had done that.
The other part of that is I was receiving emails on the other side of that. So it's kind of like we were picking and choosing. So we made a big deal out of that one, but there were also people who said the opposite of that email and sent that to people, a few people, but I didn't see people wanting to have that email. So, but I didn't realize that was the way, that had not been the way we had been operating. Basically, when someone sent me an email, I would say, thank you for your concern. If it was something that appeared to be, as we talked about earlier, I would send it to the superintendent. So so it's a double sword, because if it's what some people think is positive, depending on personally as a board member where you stand, then then it's a problem. But if you're on the other side, then it's not a problem. So I agree with, should we just send all emails to everybody? It's really confusing. So I'm liking that we are putting this into an actual norm.
But the big deal on that one was the policy BCB. That's in policy, that when you receive an email of that sort, that's what you should do. But, that's said and done.
But see, even that was, this is Pandora's box. I apologize for opening this box.
Yeah.
It's open now.
No, don't apologize. I think it's something that's been on our minds. And so if we're going to create norms, let's make them real. And I mean, that's a real situation that we need to address.
Okay,
So,
I'm still now I'm totally confused. So if somebody emails me and just says, I can't stand the principal at one of the schools in your district. I think the person has terrible manners. I don't know if I would even, I don't know what I would do with that. Am I
You
supposed
got to
to
follow the policy on that, Greg. Read
So what is
policy
the policy?
BCB. No,
So-
I just told you.
so
Follow
what?
policy BCB.
Which is,
Okay, let me be very specific about this. Policy BCB, item 11G.
It's gone.
I don't think that's the right number, Mr. Worthy.
But what does it
What
say,
now?
Charles? Just what does it say? I trust you.
What I said a few minutes ago, when
Say it
you,
again.
an email of that sort, it, making a request
No, it's
or a
complaining.
complaint.
It's complaining.
What?
It's complaining. Is there, and there's no
No,
basis.
no, hold on. I said a request. The policy, the email we talking about now, and the person we're referring to is CJ Amerson. She made a powerful request to buy the superintendent out of his contract.
Can
Is
I,
it BBC? No, it's not that one.
BCB.
Okay, I don't see one that's BCB.
It's in there.
Well, it's the BCB app. No.
Hold on.
At any rate, that letter was written, but also that action was taken, not related to the letter, I'm sure, based on what I'm hearing. I've actually had people subsequent to that say, well, we got our way. And I'm like, what does that mean?
but who
So,
said?
I mean, that's
Board
a whole
member
different.
or a constituent? I
I'm
guess
sorry?
a board member has said we got our way, or somebody you heard in the community, because I don't know that anybody on the board said.
No,
we got our
it was
way
someone in the
based on-
community. It was someone in the community, and I was
Right, but-
very disappointed to hear that.
But the community doesn't determine what the board members ultimately decide to do. So I
Yeah.
understand.
And that's what
that-
I'm talking about.
Right, so somebody sending us an email doesn't mean I'm gonna do what they request. And
But
I
you
think
did.
that, I don't know what the policy is exactly, but it says that if somebody makes a complaint, that you should refer it, just as you said, Mr. Worthy, rather than trying to handle it yourself. So my issue with that is that I was never gonna try to handle this myself. I wasn't gonna do anything with it. So to me, it didn't rise to the level of, oh, here's a concern, I'm gonna try to fix it. Which is something, if that were a concern and somebody wanted an answer to it, and it was something that I don't have the right to do in my governance role, then I would have forwarded it to the superintendent. So I think even though, I think that there is some ambiguity in that policy. And I do think that working on these norms is a really important thing to do to get rid of that ambiguity.
Well, you may be correct there, but like I said, that constituent made a powerful request to buy the superintendent out of his contract, and eventually that happened.
And I do understand that. And I will say also that I had no idea that she had done this previously. And I had a number of other people say these same things to me, either in person or on the phone or in an email. And it was not something that it just was things that people were saying to me. And I didn't know that that was something I needed to communicate to the rest of the board or the superintendent. But again, I think that fleshing out these policy or these norms is an important way to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again.
You're correct.
Okay, I still want some clarification based on this norm. If I'm getting emails that are saying we have a crappy school system and I don't like it and I want it changed, am I supposed to forward that to the superintendent to do what? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, when do I actually raise somebody, excuse my French, bitching, and it's addressed to me? Am I supposed to send it to the superintendent? It doesn't even call for a response. They're just venting.
Well, see, the example that you're giving now, the president been doing that all along.
I'm saying stuff that goes to me individually.
Well, you send it to the president. That's
But
common sense.
why, if somebody is just bitching and saying, you know, I want these kids in school and off the streets. Okay, am I supposed to say, oh man, this is something that we're gonna have to really forward to the superintendent. I gotta give it to the board president. She's gotta respond. We're gonna take this to the superintendent, let the superintendent. What? I just
Right now, Greg, we have, and we have talked about this, and I know we're developing norms that the person that would handle that, rather than every board member, if you receive something like that, well, rather than send it to the superintendent, you send it to the president.
But why
President,
did I even bother the president with it? The
Greg, you gotta follow procedures. You gotta follow norms.
Can we
If you
not-
don't
can
follow
we
these
not
things, you
shout?
may as well not set it up.
Okay,
Mr. Worthy, on the flip side, there were people sending the opposite of that email to say, please do not buy the superintendent out of his contract. There were a lot of those emails like that. I didn't take that seriously. Like
I
that,
never saw that.
we would have been sending emails all day long on that. We're the board that made those decisions. So I did not take that seriously. I took it as that's a constituent, and like I do with every constituent, I was not now. I just let Dr. Gant send her blanket, statement. But I would say thank you for sharing your concern.
Well, the emails that you said a few minutes ago, I didn't see the one email that saying do not buy the superintendent out of his contract.
Because for some reason you all didn't see that email, but you knew the other one came through. But that's a whole nother conversation, But
the only reason we saw it,
you didn't know that those emails came through that said, please do not buy the superintendent out of his contract. But for some strange reason, somehow you all saw an email that a few of us got that caused all this commotion.
So I saw emails from well, we don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I did see emails from NAACP addressed to the entire board with those complaints and those requests. And so that's what I saw. But back to this policy, I'm still trying to find the BC policy, Mr. Worthy, and I'm not sure.
I said BCB, I may be wrong with the code there,
Right.
but we have a policy. Hold on one second.
Getting back to Greg's question and his example of, somebody's just complaining because they want to go back in person full time,
Right.
I wouldn't forward that to everybody. I mean, you're all getting hammered with both sides of that fence.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the superintendent, he is or she is your one employee. And if you're getting emails about buy out the superintendent's contract, don't buy it out because, the community is divided on something and not all the board members are copied on it. Yes, you need to keep each other informed of that. You don't necessarily need to copy the superintendent. You need to discuss it in executive session if there are issues.
Thank you.
But the superintendent is your only employee, and not everything, if it's related to the superintendent, is merits going up to the superintendent, right? So you just have to use your judgment, like we've been said earlier. And so for Greg's example, I wouldn't forward it to the rest of the board or chair for a response. Just say your comment.
Yeah, no matter how you slice it, you're gonna have to at some point, as individual board members, use some judgment. And I've used that term earlier, because at some point you're gonna have to decide whether it needs to go to everybody or whether it doesn't need to go to everybody. So
I would think that at the very least, why wouldn't we send those to the board chair at least, so that, if it starts to be, if it's one, it's a one-off. If you start getting multiples, then you might want to call an executive session with a board to discuss something. And so I don't think we should bury that in our emails and not let at least the board chair know, if it's about the superintendent, that there's some conversation in the community, because we don't want to be blindsided by that. That would be my contention on that.
I probably got 100 emails individually written to me about the superintendent one way or the other doing that whole thing. Yeah. I mean, I had some people, they were just, now maybe they were blind copying me. So maybe I thought it was going just to me, because that's another technique. But I was getting inundated. Do not do this, do it, do not do it, do it, do it. And I got to the point. Now I was doing what Tawana was saying. I said, thank you for your opinion, and just letting it go. Now I don't, and if it's written just for me, just to me, or at least I think it's just to me, I don't know why I would say, board president, look what I just got. I got 10 of these in the last week and a half. Or superintendent, I got 10 of these. They're not happy. I don't know why I would do that if they're not.
Well, you're making a decision on behalf of the board. If you decide not to forward it, you're making a decision as an individual board member that this is not significant. But if as individual board members, we don't have any authority to do that, I would think it would rest with giving it to the board chair to at least be aware of a situation that could be brewing in the community.
Well, I'm sure that there was a lot of conversation about me when I was in the hot seat a few months back. And I'm sure there were a lot of emails that were being written to individual board members that I never saw, and I didn't want to see them because I had enough at the meetings. So I didn't need to see anymore. And I didn't see why those would be forwarded to the superintendent either.
So I don't think those should have been forwarded to the superintendent either. I think that, again, that's a board discussion, because the superintendent doesn't hire the board. The board hires the superintendent.
Linda, can you see what I just wrote? Linda,
Yes, I'm reading it now.
I'm sure that people got emails about me that I never
I
saw.
like that.
And I'm fine with that.
So does the decision vary depending on whether the email is about a school issue versus a district issue or district staff? So earlier we said if someone emailed you with a concern about a teacher at a particular school, you would just reply back and that wouldn't have to go to the entire board, is what I thought I heard. But then this would be, so are we categorizing it depending on the level at which the complaint is about?
I think that it should be categorized on administrative versus operations. And so if it's about anybody in your operations, that would include your district staff, that should be sent to you so that you can know what's going on and the noises in the community. If it's about you, then it stays with the board. Does that make sense?
And if it's about like a building teacher, you all wouldn't have to share that with each other. I think I'm trying to make sure we're on one page about what shared and with the
Right.
whole. So if someone emails you complaining about a teacher at Timothy Road, you respond back to that person. You don't have to share that with the entire board. Is that correct?
That's correct, because our cards say that goes to the principal.
Okay, but if
Right, and our-
a district staff person, then that goes to the board. Is that what we're agreeing
that
on?
comes to you.
Did you make a distinction like that, Dr. Ream or Dr. King?
So I just want to make sure that let's say with the example of the teacher, you refer the parent to contact the principal. You don't copy the principal on anything. You don't contact the principal.
No.
Just make sure that
No.
Oh,
okay.
So that's been the purview of the superintendent, like I hear you all saying. But the other piece that you were mentioning had to do with some complaint that related to the superintendent and that kind of thing. And if you've got a trend, based on your judgment, you see a trend of items that relate to that, then that's a board issue, which is what you just said. And these other items that relate to the superintendent and her designees or her designees, then it goes to the superintendent. So that can help
Yeah.
you clarify that.
I like that. Thank you. That's clear.
did you see I just added a word here to what you had before, which is, we originally just had if it regards communications regarding the district, should it also not have principals or operation of the district? Because so what happens if somebody's complaining about a principal? I
It
always
still
send
goes to the
those,
superintendent.
I always send those to the superintendent.
Right. So I don't know, I mean, to take out principal, well, I think principal or operation or the district period. Anything below the superintendent goes to the superintendent. Anything above the superintendent gets, and above comes to us, right? And there is no above, it's just the superintendent and the budget.
Yeah, I used to always tell people, the chain of command, and then if you're still not happy with the superintendent's response, then you contact the board. It never
Right.
got to that, but you
Mhm.
are the last stop there.
And I think it gets back to how our stakeholders view us. And so that's the difficult part, I think, sometimes because, and I'll use myself as an example, when I first came on the board, I made the mistake of speaking out against a book that was in the middle schools that I thought should have been in high school. Those people owned me for a solid year. I mean, every time I turned around, it was like, here's another thing we need to do. And I'm like, that's not my world and that's not my role. I'm so sorry I said anything about that book. But I still believe what I said, but I should not have said it publicly.
We teach them how to treat us. And so
Mhm.
keep solving stakeholders' problems, they're going to keep coming back to you. And it's
Right.
not appropriate. And, most board members are people pleasers. So you want to do a good job and you want to make sure that your stakeholders are happy, but it's hard for those people pleasers to not do what they want you to do all the time. Speaking from experience.
Kara, did we cover your other questions or we still got some hanging?
Well, I think Greg asked about it, the question about sort of the distinction between a concern or a complaint versus somebody just venting to you and they're not really asking you to do anything. They're just complaining to you. But I think, I don't know, I have to go back and read all of this, but I understand the need to let all the rest of the board members know if there is a situation where somebody in the community is trying to divide the board. And that is not something that I had thought of previously. So I'm glad that we've talked about that. But that is still different than if somebody is just contacting you and then you can bring it up with the superintendent and you don't have to tell everybody else about it. Yes, I'm getting kind of fuzzy in these different scenarios.
So someone's complaining to you about something.
Yeah. So like the example I gave earlier where like people were complaining to me about somebody at a particular school, and I brought it up to Dr. Thomas, and then she disseminated that information then out to the board because she then thought that they needed to know about it. But I hadn't copied the rest of the board on any of the emails or any of my communications with Dr. Thomas. She was the one who, once it got to a certain level, decided that everybody
Right.
needed to know.
And that was what I was going to say, Dr. Dykeman. Once it got to the level of potentially being a personnel issue or a personnel change, then I felt that the entire board needed to be aware.
Right.
So there was more than one complaint, obviously. There was,
Mhm.
so yeah, right. Okay, now I understand.
And there were issues coming up from within the school in addition to what Dr. Dykeman had heard. So.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, should I have let other board members know prior to Dr. Thomas letting them know, or is that okay to, I mean, it wasn't really concerning them, so I
personally think it's okay. Sometimes you need to have a conversation with your superintendent saying, hey, I'm hearing this. I don't know if this is true. And I'm not hearing all sides of this. So I just want to keep you in the loop on this. And it's up to her or him to decide whether to investigate. But if you're hearing trends, then it's definitely a concern.
Okay, here's a situation, and I do want to get people's responses to it. We have a policy that says that staff, teachers, let's say, for instance, have a right to communicate to board members without disciplinary consequences.
Gotcha.
Okay. We don't go out to them, but if they seek us out and say, I want to talk to you as a board member, then they have a right to do that. Now, if we have a norm that says Okay, well, you can express your concern about you don't feel safe going back to work because of COVID right now. Okay. And I can, now if it's in the email, all I would say is, that this is what the superintendent's making this decision. I don't mind saying that because that is the superintendent's decision to make. But if I say, thank you for your concern, it's a superintendent matter, I'm passing it to the superintendent and I'm notifying the entire board of your concern. I don't, that to me seems way out of line.
I agree.
So I don't know how other board members feel, and I don't know how this relates to the norms that we're writing up.
So in terms of somebody wants to be anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they sought me out.
I hear you.
And what did they expect you to do?
I gotta charge my battery, but I don't know. It was more of a frustration on their part. Yeah, clearly what they were, if it ever came to a vote, I'm presumably they would say, they would hope that I would say, don't go back to school, presumably. But I don't know I got a lot of those emails, but I don't think I ever got nobody was asking for clarification in terms of, because I didn't have the power to do anything.
Right.
So they were just asking for your vote to ensure that they didn't go back to
They
school?
didn't even ask for my vote because it wasn't my vote to give.
I'll vote on that.
Well, again, I'm just curious as to what they wanted to, because I've had a couple of conversations with parents that I know, people at my church always, and we had the conversations about going back to school and their concerns about going back to school. And so we talked honestly and openly about, what are the risks in going back to school and the hard decisions that people had to make. And again, so that was just a conversation. I haven't relayed that to anybody.
Yeah, and I think I don't think you have to.
Right. You have to use your best judgment in those types of cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the one that you're raising right now is one that's a conversation that probably 100% of the 180 governance teams across Georgia have been immersed in that conversation.
Sure.
But what we can say to you is that you already talked about the authority of the superintendent and that decision making in her team. Best practice around this, and I'm sure as I hear you that you all have done this, is that then she has updated you on what those indicators were on how your decisions were made, and so to give you talking points or bullets. So that's some of the things that you can think about in communicating during tough times. What were you've got a person who is the designee for the board that communicates. Many times the superintendent or her designee will provide talking point bullets around that, especially with this COVID discussion. This one is different, but that's how that happened. And when you're thinking about this, people are lining up on the left, the right, and in the middle
All the
with this one.
time.
So if you're looking to be a winner on it, you're not going to come out as a winner on it, but you can certainly end up at a point where the rationale or the indicators or bullets for the decision making that you can present that, whether it's 3 to 5 items that the superintendent presented to you, like for example, hot spots. Here's what we use to make our decision. We sought input from the community. We studied the positive rate of infection in the community, those kinds of indicators. But again, even after you do that, you're still going to have some people that are going to ask you to do certain things that you can't do. But your duty to respond will be around some of those talking points that many times the administration will provide you as well. So.
I think a lot of the issues around this norm go back to our issues with trust in the board also, because there's a lot of spaces where we can't lay everything out and we have to say when appropriate or use your judgment. And I think we're not necessarily at a place where everybody trusts everybody else's judgment. And so I think that's making that may be making people uncomfortable. So, but I don't think that, I think we've talked through a bunch of examples, which is good, but I don't think we can lay out every possible scenario and say what would be the right thing to do. So I'm
I
not
think
sure.
that's a good point. I think that we'll build trust, but we can't, nobody can dictate that on this day you start trusting each other. That's going to happen over time, and it will happen over opportunities, I would say. And so again, I think, well, if for people that are willing to build trust, and it'll happen over time. I don't think anybody can mandate that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm just saying, I think that that's why there has, and I think a lot of this discussion has been really good. But even when people do trust each other, I think sometimes what one person thinks is appropriate is not what somebody else would have done in the same situation. So I think we just have to know that we're all
I agree.
human, and if we all are going towards the same goal, then
And these take practice, right? So that's why we always recommend that you, at your annual retreat or whenever, look at the norms, see how they're working, and discuss it throughout the year. Add them that when you need them, take away what you don't need, or what isn't working, and having conversations about this. I think this is one way to start building that trust, so that you are all on the same page when it comes to what's the expected action, and that you hold each other accountable. And Greg's judgment might be different than Linda's judgment, so it comes with practice, and you'll learn more about each other throughout this process.
Julie, let me say this. I saw that Dr. Thomas put that code for the policy that I was talking about. Instead of BCB, it was BAB in item 11G.
Thank you.
But what the key word is attempting to solve them directly. Because when I'm talking about, I'm not even attempting to solve.
Yeah, that's the good point.
Not based on anyone's complaint. Now, in terms of what Amison did, there was nothing there that she told me that I didn't already know. So, I mean, that's why I discounted. I mean, I have my own opinion. So right or wrong. So so anyway, it's not based on anybody's request. That to me is written when someone wants you to call a principal up and say, I want you to talk to that teacher. That to me is what that's talking about.
But what I was saying, Greg, with the policy BAB in that item 11G, the superintendent was never notified of that.
Well, and the other piece of that is, again, never mind. I just have strong feelings about the influence. Signatures matter, people matter. And so people in positions of power and authority carry a lot more weight than a letter from somebody you don't know and never heard of, right? So yeah, that was my concern, because to me, that's an influencing thing, my opinion.
And I believe that that's true. But again, the person who is of influence to one person might not be of influence to somebody else. And what you know about somebody may not be what I know about that same person. So I think there's lots of.
Yeah, there was an opportunity to have a conversation about that, and maybe we could have all shed some light on that. But again, it shouldn't have mattered, because everybody's going to vote for their conviction based on what they know, not what someone tells them to do, surely.
That's right.
That's about.
That's exactly right. That's right.
But we did have a conversation about that, but it was an executive session, and I'm not about to mention something that was discussed in the executive session, because we are live here. We had a conversation about it, but we can move on. We're writing norms.
So I wrote this paragraph 7. It's highlighted in yellow to try
Thank
to
you.
capture what I think people have been saying? See if you think it's appropriate or accurate. Dead silence.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm,
No, I like it.
I wanted to see
will.
preferred sounding board as opposed to good. We don't know if it's good or not. They may be having a moment too, but
Or just a sounding board. It doesn't
Yeah,
even have
I'm
to have
good with
any adjective.
take that adjective out of there.
I sounding board. No, I didn't make any difference.
So and I added that last part from personal experience. Again, when I first came on the board, I was getting a lot of emails from a lot of people, and Dr. Gant provided a very good sounding board for me to say, what am I supposed to do with all these things? And she helped me think my way through it and gave me some guidance. And, so that helped me a lot. So that's why I put that there.
I think it's great, but this has to make y'all happy, not me.
I'm good with it. And I think just having this norm for the new board members is going to make a huge difference in terms of
Definitely.
what to do with all these emails.
So is there anything else about this particular norm that hasn't been addressed or that you had questions about that were down there? I think Dr. Dykeman.
Can I just,
So do we,
can I just say, like, with number 7, like, maybe I can sleep on it, but it goes back to that policy piece, right? Because I still feel like there is, there's discretion, and I hear what people are saying is that we'll build this trust, right? We'll build trust over time. But one of the reasons that sort of got us here was because of that discretion. And if we're saying that, like, I agree with number 7 fully, because that's typically how I tend to think about it, whether it's coming from one individual to just me, or if it's coming from one individual to 5 of us. I just sort of think like, okay, the person they sent it to, that's who they wanted to receive it. I don't know, I don't know the background here. I don't know that, so I don't know that we can reconcile it. I guess for me, it still feels like there is a good bit of ambiguity, and I support it. I just worry. I don't want us to, get back in the situation or have the, conversations we've had before, the tensions we've had before that Dr. Dykeman mentioned are probably more related to trust than they are the actual policy or the norm.
Well, I'm assuming that
Change it. I can go with the, the general consensus. I just wanted to sort of state that for the.
Is there something more that we can do that helps to? I'm with you. I'm tired of living in a tension-filled world and a hostile work environment. I want us to get to that place that we actually can create a norm that we can live by. And again, it may not make me happy, but it's something that I can live with and that we can do. Is there something missing? What's missing in it?
I can live by it. I can live by it because I think that appropriate still gives me discretion to say, you know what, Lakeisha, just go ahead and send this to everybody so you can avoid any type of, future tensions or conflicts. So I can live with it. I just wanted to just make that.
so,
I
yeah.
feel like number 7, if somebody really wants to be anonymous, they're going to call you because the email you send a board member is open for public record. So as soon as you send something or you receive something, that's a matter of public record. Anybody can request your emails. So it's a risk for someone to reach out to you via email if they want to remain anonymous.
That was going to be my question. So if somebody emails us, and I guess there's no way for us to know what they think, but basically they can't really be anonymous. And is that something that we need to let constituents know or let people know that any emails are subject to open records, or I don't know.
Some board members have that on their signatures. Some have it. I know one constituent said, whenever you get an email or you send an email to a school board member, there needs to be an automatic like vacation response saying, thank you for your comment. It's been entered into the public record.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So, I mean, you can go to that extent and use your expertise from your legal counsel on that. But I mean, anything subject to open records, including text messages. So,
You know, I think that happens. Well, we have to put that message on at Athens Tech, and it goes to every email that we get. It talks about being open records and the fact that we're virtual, or were at one point. So yeah, the school kind of does that for us.
mm-hmm. Yep,
Automatic response.
the thought. But definitely, you know, hopefully people aren't requesting all your emails, but never know.
But they would have to know what they're, I mean, and people have I have other email addresses too.
Doesn't matter.
So I understand
matter.
that, but if a teacher uses my own personal email, I mean, I can broadcast it and say, hey, I just got an email from teacher so-and-so. Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna file open records for it. But I don't know, you know, I know it doesn't matter legally, and we've talked about that. But I'm just saying that people feel more comfortable doing it that way. And again, I'm talking about people that I've known for 10 years, 12 years. I worked with them. And so what now?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying they're expressing a concern, and we're having a conversation. And to me, it's no different than you going to church, Linda, and people coming up to you saying, I don't feel good about going back to school, or these kids got to go back to school, and you're having a discussion with them, and it's a nationwide discussion, as Dr. King was saying. So we're just citizens as well. I mean, we're not just in this one little bubble that I'm just a school board member and that's all I've got going on in my life, and I don't have any other opinions about anything else. So I'm just anyway, I think we need to keep the language as it is and not try to tease it out anymore. That's my opinion. Plus it's 9 o'clock.
Yes, we are past time. So I think we're pretty close to wrapping this one up.
Yeah, I think those questions at the bottom have been answered. So
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Didn't see them all.
I think we got that one.
I mean, I think we've discussed that one quite a bit as well.
I think
Wahoo.
that's quite an accomplishment. This is a difficult norm.
Amen.
Nice.
All right, so it looks as if we got through two major areas.
So does it make sense to fold this one into the communication one when that one's done, or will we maybe see when we get to that?
I would think so, but it depends on how your communications ones look. And
Okay, we can discuss it when we get to it, I guess.
yeah, it can be its own separate one too. Whatever works for y'all.
Probably a good place to bring closure for tonight,
Great.
and try to refuel and retool for tomorrow.
Great discussion. Got a lot accomplished. This is good work.
Yeah.
So we'll defer to your board chair and to your superintendent, Dr. Thomas, for concluding comments and adjournment when you're ready.
Dr. Thomas, Dr. Maddox, or colleagues on the board, is there anything else related to our norm discussion? All right, so,
No, I don't. Sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
No, I didn't have anything else. I didn't realize I was muted. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. So we'll move forward to item number 4, which is adjournment.
I so move.
Okay, Ms. Davis made our motion for us.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Davis with the second. I don't see any objections or hands raised, so we will adjourn our meeting at 9:13.